Hey,
Good.
well, my name is Mike Remington. Welcome to our City Council Special Workshop. Today is Friday, January 29th, 2021. It's now 9:35 and we'll call our meeting to order. Today we have four specific items that we hope to get to. Our first item is City Council 2021 Priorities and Work Plan. Our second item is Mayor City Council training from our city attorney, Daniel Kinney. Our third item is discussion on form of government. That will be with our city attorney as well. This is more of a educational piece today. And then finally, we have council committees with Rick Schaefer being here, our newest council member. We wanted to be able to make sure that we finalize those assignments. So the first thing I'd like to do is just welcome Rick. Rick, this is your first official meeting. You've been sworn in as a council member. We are absolutely delighted to have you with us, especially with your experience and background. I look forward to our conversations and just encourage you to participate and represent our citizens as you see fit. So we'll jump right into our first item, City Council. Go ahead, Rick. Did you want to say a word?
Yeah, Mike, and I apologize. I lost audio there for a second. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Anyway, I am thrilled to be here, and I'm very much looking forward with working with all of you. Very much looking forward to being part of the future of Duval as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Well, this first item on City Council 2021 Priorities and Work Plan, some have suggested we actually call it our goals. One of the challenges when you talk about priorities is somebody someplace is going to look at the list and go, you left us out. You don't care about us. The other challenge with work plans is there are some items that we don't always get accomplished. So some people feel like we've failed somehow. And so I may modify this or at least add the word goal at the end of work plan to just understand these are things that we hope to get to. Many times things pop up during the year that get added to the list that aren't on here now. So I had asked council to send me their top 4 to 7 items. And I think I heard from most everybody. The list isn't as long as the draft we originally had. And these are the key items. What I hope to do today was just take a look at the list, go through and say, is there something that we want to add? Is there something we feel like we should take off? And just be able to have a discussion about some of these items and you know, what's the goal for moving these forward? Is it something that we want all of council to work together on with the city at committee of the whole? Are these things that we can move on to one of our committees to be able to discuss? A few practical things I always try to remind folks is that when you're setting goals and items that they should be specific, something that's attainable. You know, my wife always reminds me that world peace is #1 on her list, and we're still working on it. It needs to be affordable. You know, I'm always cautious when we're done with the budget that we don't start adding things that just haven't been included in the budget or we don't think we have money to be able to move forward. And finally, just considering capacity and workload for our staff to make sure that it can be worked in with all the daily things that that have to get done as a city. So I'm just going to read through these. Item 1, and by the way, these aren't necessarily ranked in order of priority. I did take the top 4 items, 5 items, where folks mentioned them multiple times. So several council members had these listed. Item 1 was explore change in form of government. 2, financial planning. That would be hiring a municipal advisor. 3, complete our ethics policy for elected officials. Some have suggested that we should also have one for city employees as well. Item 4, public communication and outreach.
Mike, just a second. We do have an ethics policy for city employees.
Yes, I try to include all the comments. Obviously, I don't have every last comment, but when people bring those up. So thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. Our city facility master plan. Item 6, development and growth. There was some suggestion that maybe land use could look at some of these or other committees. And these were a few of the different things that came up to be considered. Growth and annexation, development issues, municipal code updates that are related to that, design standards, economic development, affordable housing options. So all those are things that could go under the development and growth topic. Item 7 was transportation advocacy with King County and Washington State. Develop a plan to consistently advocate for solutions. We're already on some committees, but I think we recognize that's one of the top items our citizens bring up. Item 8, pandemic response, public and employee health and safety. Item 9, Parks Board or a Parks Advisory Committee. Item 10, financial policy. We're working on the procurement policy portion. Item 11, sales tax to support police department services. Item 12, city administrator in the first quarter, currently being worked on. And item 13, small business grants for frontage improvements. That topic was related to things like sidewalks and parking, other things that are required in the code that might actually prohibit some development that we might want to see downtown in our business district. So those are the items. I will just first go around. I'd like to see if folks have anything they'd like to add, or if there's something on the list that someone feels shouldn't be on the list. For all of you, this is really the first time you've seen this particular list. It's one that I put together after getting feedback from City Council. So I'll start just going through our council members and just hear your thoughts on it. And then we can go back around a second time and talk a little bit more about if we want to assign these and how we might move these forward. This is also opportunity for staff, Mayor, for you and Laura, Chief and others. It's very important to collaborate on these. So please feel free for everybody to join in and let me know about your thoughts, and especially for our city staff. Do you think these are attainable? Many of them we're obviously already working on. So I'll just go through Amy McHenry. I'll start with you and just get your thoughts on if there's anything you want to add or subtract from the list. I think I've got you, you're on mute.
Now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
So I think everything, did you say that this list is everything everyone sent in together?
It is.
Okay. So, I mean, my top ones are, I think the ethics policy, because it's so attainable. I know it'd be easy for that to kind of fall down the list every year compared to some of these other items, but I do think it's important that we finish it, and I think it's very doable. And especially since some time has passed since we started it and we have new legal counsel, it'd be a great time to just get some fresh eyes on that. We have so many new council members too, for everyone to relook at that and kind of give some feedback. I don't know, let me look. So, we've talked about this at past meetings, the small business grants for frontage improvements, especially in the time right now of the pandemic. I think it's something we should really look at sooner rather than later. And I think it's something that council could help a lot with. I understand if it's a burden for staff, but there's a lot that council could do to move that forward and not have it take years. I think that something that always comes up and was one of my top ones is people ask, about the roads and the traffic. And, so often it's easy to say, well, a lot of them are out of our control. There's nothing we can do, but there is something we can do, and we can advocate together. And I think that's something that takes the coordination of not only council, but the mayor and staff. And I think if we could at least come up with some sort of strategy and decide what are our goals, what's our message, and how are we going to accomplish making sure that this is a message we continue to tell our county and state officials, and not just in like a one pager. I mean, I know that's helpful and that's necessary and great, but I think we could be doing more to advocate for these improvements that we'll need someday, hopefully sooner rather than later. I think that in our code, it's outlined for a parks committee with the community and staff and maybe a council member or two. I can't remember how some of those committees work or how it's laid out, but with our new property that we acquired next to Big Rock Ball Fields. But in general, the overall vision of Duval, parks are really important. Every survey we've ever done, we know that parks and trails are super important to our citizens. And I think that it's something that we should just start up again and get going so that we can really involve some community members and start them early on in the process of as we look at what we want to do with that new property, and of course other improvements as well. And then changing government, I think, I've said this over the years, but if we're interested at all, we just need to start something with it. And that's probably just going to be a lot of research and conversations at this point. So I think if we ever want to get the ball rolling on that, it's better to start now rather than later. And then lastly, the other one is what Councilmember Langle brought up a while ago, and I definitely support, is a public outreach or communication committee. I think that so often when we come to, through any department, things come up that we want community input. It seems like we sort of have to reinvent the wheel each time, or, well, what does council want to see? What does staff want to see? And I think it'd be really helpful, as Councilmember Langle has said, to come up with what our expectations are for different kinds of communication to the community and how we involve them. And I think that's something that a few council members and staff could work together on and work out some guidelines so that anytime something comes up, whether it's something we want feedback on or something out of a committee, that we already have a set of expectations and guidelines for what needs to be done. And it doesn't have to be a new conversation every time. Other than that, I don't see anything on there I would take off. I think it's just a matter of organizing them in terms of priority.
Great. Well, thank you. You had provided a lot of very direct feedback and some background on each of these, so I really appreciate that. I wanted to also welcome Diane. We didn't think you might get here till 10, but thank you for joining us. We introduced our newest council member, Rick Schaefer, and we just started going around talking about this council work plan goals priority list. So you haven't fallen behind at all here. So thank you. Michelle Hogue, your thoughts on the list?
Okay.
Anything that you would, do you agree with it? Anything you want to add or take away?
I don't see anything to take off the list. The only thing I'm kind of, I've been thinking would be kind of nice to add would be, and I don't really know what to call it, maybe you guys can help with this, but besides the small business grants, is something like outreach to businesses. It'd be nice if we had a council member that was maybe on the chamber and could kind of give us, I guess, kind of be a connection between the local businesses and us. So I don't really know what to call it, but I think it's more outreach to businesses as well. I do think the financial planning for the future forecasting is a real high priority for us, besides, of course, form of government and city administrator, but I think I would put that on my top of my list. And I do think the ethics policy is ready to be brought forward. I was kind of hoping I could ask council. I talked with Councilmember McHenry about it, and we think we're ready to bring it forward, but we'd like to maybe have a meeting with the attorney before. So we wanted to ask permission from council to have a little time with the attorney to kind of discuss it and get his opinion, because I don't know that he's really looked at it. So that's about it.
Yeah.
But I think we can get that done, the ethics policy.
Well, thank you for that. I'm not sure, we have a committee we don't staff, which is the economic development, but I do like that idea. And I've heard from several council members about having a stronger outreach and collaboration with our business community. One of the thoughts folks had were trying to get a few memberships where we'd actually assign it to 1, 2, 3 members of council that could attend through their membership. And then the next year we might rotate that. So eventually everyone would have that opportunity to do that as well. And of course, the mayor attends regularly. In fact, when COVID first hit, the mayor invited me as a guest so I could attend a few of those meetings, which I enjoyed. It's pretty fascinating to hear directly from businesses and all the issues that they have, challenges. Jennifer Naplin, your thoughts on our list? Anything to add, take away?
Sure. So I won't totally rehash because Amy did such a great job describing. I felt like I could just say yes to everything she said. But just briefly, transportation, yes, I feel like a coordinated advocacy plan, and just the fact that when our legislators were here, how strongly they were encouraging us to have projects that are ready, and we don't just want vague help us with transportation. They want more specifics, projects. Well, those aren't our projects necessarily, but somehow we're going to have to find a way to advocate in a coordinated fashion. And then parks, I've been bringing this up for forever. I know staff has, I mean, we have so much going on, but with different parks coming online, it just feels like there needs to be some coordination between what the community wants and what the community prioritizes and how we're spending our money and what we're investing our time in. Small businesses, 100%. There's a lot more people walking, and as these businesses start opening up again, just having the businesses accessible, the frontage, work for everyone in the community. I would really like to see something there. And I'm with Amy McHenry that council could do some research ahead of time. Maybe we go find out what some other cities are doing and kind of put together a proposal and just, maybe have an ad hoc committee to even just look at it as council members and save staff some time before we really kick something off. And then the financial policy and the planning I see as kind of a joint process, because for me, I think that financial advisor could help us understand what to pinpoint in our financial policy. So I see those as a joint effort. One could inform the other. So I really hope to get that moving forward. Change of government, there's pros and cons to the different forms of government, but we've talked about it for a long time. We just need to dig in and explore it, find out how the timing could work. Do we even want to do that? I there's definitely pros and cons. So having this on the list doesn't mean we're going to do it, but we need to explore it and try to figure out what is best for our community. And then the public outreach, I love the idea that, we're doing more surveys, we're, trying to find new ways to communicate, but, having more focus on that, I think would be helpful, because even with the surveys, I interviewed the different council member candidates, and some of them hadn't even seen the surveys, and and these are people who are really interested in our local government and want to be involved, and some people didn't even know about it. And so how can we reach those people who care and want to give feedback? So I'd really like to see some more effort, and especially with coronavirus and not being able to be at meetings in person, somehow we need to find a way to engage a little bit more. And then the one thing that I wasn't super comfortable about that's on the list is the sales tax to support police department services. Of course, I support police department services, but I'm not quite sure I'm ready for the sales tax, and that I don't know that I would want to move forward with that under the current circumstances. We just added the sales tax for the TBD, the Transportation Benefit District. And I don't think that I'm ready to ask the community for another increase in sales tax. So that's one that I'm a little hesitant on right now to call it a priority. That's not a priority to me. We have a lot of money coming in right now. And I just don't see any desperate need to do that right now. Anyway, thanks.
Jennifer, thank you. Would you change the name of that, since we're not currently going after sales tax right now? Would you say investigate or explore or consider? Is that a better way to word that for now? Or is it something you'd just say, let's take off the list for you personally?
I personally not have it on the list. I don't even think I need to investigate it. I mean, I know what it is. I know how it works. So for me, I feel like I understand it enough to know that I am not interested in doing that right now or spending staff time on it. It's not a priority for me, but it may be for others.
Yeah, that actually follows up with our discussions during budget, when I think I brought up, are there additional revenue sources we should be seeking or considering? And I think a majority, if not all of council, said, you know, we just didn't think this was the right time, partly because of the pandemic and partly because we do have pretty good revenues. So that might be one we consider taking off our list then. Councilmember Langle.
Oh, I'm glad you asked on me, because I wanted to make sure to ask Councilmember Bernicki if she had a favorite color, because I'm color coding everybody's answers. So she can speak up when it's her turn. Well, I think everybody knows that the financial planning is my top priority, and a number of things we're talking about are going to need some financial strategy behind them, whether it's sales tax increases, bonds for wastewater treatment. I went back and looked at some finance and administration notes. Other ideas have been floated over the last year. And, once we kind of understand our longer horizon, I think that will have a lot of benefit to define what we need and when. And the dilemma I struggle with is piecemeal financing. That puts me in the category of, no, I don't want to look at anything, right? Because I don't feel like I've got that longer horizon. And I also really, really, really want it to be a collaboration with administration. And I've always talked about it that way. And the mayor has said she supports it. So I'm hoping we can always do this, because this is something that can shape the city for a very long time if we do it well. So that's one thing. Public outreach communications, definitely a priority. Some of the things we want to do, like transportation advocacy, figuring out what kind of collaboration around parks, the business support. Those are all things where doing a little bit of community organizing helps, because not only do we get information from them that is what they like, we also get ideas from them and what they think is going to work for them. And, it can be a great interactive process. And the example that I bring up a lot is how neighborhood night out works. I mean, it is a traditional community development tool. I think it works really well in this community, and it's something we can build off of ideologically. And so, that's another thing that always pops into my mind. Procurement, I think we're going to be done pretty soon. I mean, there's been a lot of research around procurement. What we're really down to at the heart of it is how does approvals work between council and mayor? That's one element. What are thresholds for competition? Understanding the nuances between a couple of categories, because there's definitely some different state laws that define things that are a little different than way Duval has worked in the past. But I think once we get through that stuff, we really can, finish procurement. And there's a lot of different examples other cities use if we need to shift gears and pick a different city template. So I wanted to reassure people that our goal is to finish that by the end of the first quarter, and push forward on that. I've been involved in small business frontage improvement programs before. They're called facade improvement programs. They can be very effective. Of course, our state laws are tricky to do this, but that doesn't mean we can't figure out a way to do it. We just have to dig in on that one. So I'm looking at other people's comments here real quickly. I haven't done a lot of research on change in form of government. The research I've done, there are some essentially timelines and work plans other cities have put together when they've decided to do that. It's not an overnight process. You do have to plan for it. As much as you plan for it, you want to give the voters a clear message on how a transition would work. And so I'm looking forward to that presentation today. I concur with Council Member Naplin. There's always pros and cons in things. So working through that, digging in is a good thing. And some of the things on this list, I do think can be assigned to committees and bringing recommendations back to council. That is within our potential authority under the code. And, maybe we need to move more in that direction now that we have experience with committees. So, and I have color coded all of you. So, because I want to always remember what you had to say, and different colors help me to do that quickly.
Well, Dot, thank you so much. Diane Brunicki, thoughts on the list? Anything that you would add or subtract?
Well, so for Dot, Councilmember Link, my favorite color is aubergine, but if you don't put that in your color code selection, I do like aqua. I think regarding what we can achieve, I'm one of those folks that I really like to focus. There's 13 things here, so I would say they can remain as a story, but the top ones to me, prioritizing them, would be the city facility master plan, and then the parks board or parks advisory, because we have so many parks we've invested in. And I think we should have really done this a little earlier, but this makes it a real priority. How do we maintain, how do we expand things for the new pieces that we acquire, and for development that comes in, they're going to have their parks as well. So that to me is a real priority. If people are, exploring the change of government would be a priority, because that's such a long timeline, an investment. So if anyone's thinking that that's something they want to do, we certainly want to get started at least exploring it. And public outreach would be the fourth. After that, it's really difficult to add these as top priorities because we're so limited. But I think because we're such a strong community, that we always want to keep our finger on public outreach. And the way people are reached today and going forward is consistently, it's just changing. And so being able to understand how do you reach your community, basically market to them, the information you have becomes really important. I mean, at one point, I recall it was the newspaper. We got information when I was on council, and now we're all the way to Zoom meetings. And so being able to know how to utilize whatever's current that people are using for communications to our benefit, not only for programs, I think programs are really important, but also consistently keeping education up, because it is the education that I think we owe it to our community to keep the education going for them so that they're not stressed out. There's not, false information going around town, that we're all on the same page and we can function much better as a community when we do provide that kind of information for them in a timely manner. So those are the 4 things I thought about. I think the rest all are, of course, are important, but with what staffing we have to really determine, what are the top things so that they can really execute on that.
Dan, thank you. So our newest council member, Rick Schaefer. Rick, I'd love to be able to hear from you. This is the first time you've obviously seen this list as well. Your thoughts on the list? Is there anything that you feel like we should add or subtract?
First, let me say I do strongly support the views of the previous council members that just spoke. Let me say I think the list is ambitious, maybe overly so. And as a few of you alluded to, I think we need to establish priorities within this list. I'm sure that's obvious just about to everyone, but in order to actually get things done, we have to have a good sense of what our priorities are. As far as things that are near and dear to my heart, I'll just go from top to bottom. Ethics policy, and mostly because I think that's low-hanging fruit. I think it's something that we can do specifically for elected officials, the council included, of course. Establish an ethics policy based on what other cities have done, based on common sense. I don't think that would be a whole lot of work for us. Then, as I think you all know, development growth, controlled growth in particular, is near and dear to my heart. And I'd like to make sure that we certainly pay attention to what's happening to Duval and have a vision for the future of Duval as well, a long-term vision. And again, I know most of you do, but we need to be thinking, 10 years plus down the line, what's Duval going to be like? What do we and the citizens of Duval want it to be like? Small business grants for frontage improvements. Absolutely supportive of that. The outreach program in particular for small businesses, I think is a terrific idea. I've actually thought myself about the possibility of just, going around or establishing Zoom meetings with small business owners and getting their input. I think that's critical for any kind of priorities we want to establish for our downtown area. We have to get the input of those businesses. As I've said a few times, I think the small business community of Duval is the true heart of Duval. It's what makes Duval what it is. So any kind of outreach program, grants, downtown development. And I know that's not an item on our financial list this year, but something that we have to keep in mind for the future. And okay, and I did miss one. I apologize. Going back, public outreach again. I think we have some, technology, Zoom included, that can largely assist that. We can get the word out to the public in one way or another. I'm not really clear on exactly how to do that, but certainly establish maybe some open forums for our citizens to give us their thoughts on on what Duval needs to be doing. And as far as taking anything off the list, I don't see anything. And I know Councilmember Naplin mentioned the taking off the sales tax for police department services. And truly, I don't understand that well enough to comment one way or the other yet. So I'll leave that up to you more experienced folks. But I think it's a great list. I think we're going to have an interesting year ahead of us. That's it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Outstanding. Mayor, I wanted to call on you. you're the CEO overseeing all our operations, and you have to fit this in with all the daily tasks. We know that our workload is huge. Rick may be right. We may be over ambitious here,
Absolutely.
but what goes into more, yeah.
Well,
So
well,
you're
to
not.
to that point, to the over ambitious, this is also how we create our work plans internally, and you try and get the low hanging fruit. It helps keep pushing you forward and helps you prioritize what's most important and keeps things on the list for the long term. What I'm thrilled about is that many of these things have been on my agenda for quite a while, and to have council support and agreement to move some of these things forward is very, very exciting to me. One thing I do see missing, and I think it was just an oversight, is council had talked previously about updating your council procedures. And I think that needs to be done because that'll help administration and council moving forward and make things a bit easier and streamlined. As far as top priorities, I mean, I think absolutely it's that, the city facilities master plan, our financial planning, from the administration side, transportation advocacy, and everyone knows I've been working on this issue for the entire time I've been an elected official, and it's been very difficult with previous councils to get people involved, and now Councilmember Naplin's getting quite involved. And I actually Mike and I are having a meeting on Monday to discuss some other things regarding federal issues, but I think people are ready to develop just kind of an ad hoc legislative committee. And I just right off the bat, going a little bit off topic, I would really like a couple volunteers to meet every Friday morning. I do serve on the AWC Board of Directors Legislative Steering Committee. So we meet regularly through session. And, I sent a bill out to council this week that was a great idea, but not practicable for the city to implement it this time, and it was in its current form. But I would really like to get a few people to meet weekly during session just to go over what's happened, what's coming up, and help steer that forward. The biggest challenge here is in the small business grants for frontage improvement. That's been on my list. The challenge here is talking to Steve. The capacity isn't there for some of this work right now. We want to get it done. So I think, as we look at this, we also have to look at staff is at well over capacity. Many of our directors are working more hours than ever now during the work from home side of it. And getting our statutory obligations done first has to be the priority. Dealing with community issues has to be the priority. So I think everything on here long-term is attainable. But I think, obviously, and I still think, beginning that exploration and change of form of government, if we do decide to go this direction, and I still believe it's the best long-term for the city, we have an opportunity to do it right. We have an opportunity to look at the good things, the positive outcomes, the mistakes that other jurisdictions have made, and have an opportunity, if we move forward, to do it in an appropriate time fashion that lets city business continue to operate at a normal pace while the preparation's moving forward. So I think, in general, it's all good. The sales tax issue, that is part of the long-term financial resiliency discussion, because in general, our general fund, we have very, very little flexibility in raising revenue needed to support the city. We all know that we're significantly understaffed right now. And so how do we get the staffing levels we need to get some of these achievements done? Because without proper staffing levels, it just can't happen. But it's all great. And I am really excited by the comments. This is the Parks Board. We've been trying to get Laura some time to get that off the ground and haven't been able to get it done, but that's definitely something we want to do as well. And I think in general, we're in complete alignment here, and I'm really excited about it.
Thank you, Mary. As we mentioned, I think we just see up front that it's not council that's necessarily doing all the work on these, and that collaborating is going to be really important. work together, and especially with directors that often have to fit these and all their other workload. Councilmember Lingle, I see you have your hand up.
I was just going to suggest a friendly amendment to our title. Instead of calling it a draft 2021 work plan, maybe we should have it match the budget period,
Yeah.
which 2022, 2021, 2022. Because some of these things will go further than 2021. So just that suggestion, change our title.
Yeah, and to that point, all of this work is going to take more than a year. So I think that's a great suggestion. If you guys change it to a 2-year work plan, then you can just come back next year and evaluate what you've gotten done, what we've gotten done and what we're still working on, and have like a check-in on it. That would be fantastic.
Is there a general agreement in making this a 2-year plan that kind of aligns with our budget? What are your thoughts on that? How many would feel comfortable having a longer period? Yeah, it looks like most everybody. A lot of this is already on our current work plan, so I'm happy to change that. And, these are moving targets. Well, I'd love to hear from some of our staff. Chief Hurt, and especially if you could talk about the tax. It's my expectation as we move forward with financial planning and getting a municipal advisor, they're looking at that long-term stability, how we're doing with our expenses and what we might need to move ahead. So I would expect that might be part of that discussion. Well, Chief, your thoughts?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thanks for allowing Mike and I to be here. I did want to point out that we are just here for this specific section of your retreat, and I don't want you to think we're rude when we leave the meeting after this. We just want to make sure that we know what your priorities are, and hopefully we can start work to complementing those. But I did have a couple comments, and I did want to start with the development and growth portion of your list. Not to anyone's fault, but we know that, the developments that are coming in now, the planning and for those developments started 10, 15, 20 years ago. So that's typically what's going to happen when you start talking about new developments and annexation and stuff. The only thing I would comment was, I hope moving forward that police are more involved in those initial stages. For whatever reason, and I've never really been involved in any of it. But again, most of the developments that are coming in now predate me, and they probably predate most of the staff, if not all the staff. But I think police has a seat at that table. I think there's value in having police at the table, and probably fire as well. So I just wanted to make that comment moving forward, if that could be something that you at least consider. So I'm sorry.
Chief, I was just going to ask, how do you see that impacting development? I mean, and at what point, how would you want to have that discussion? And I appreciate that, because more people mean more response by police. There's specific things about access, safety. Schools now, they design with police in mind in case they have a response, that they have multiple ways of getting in, multiple ways of getting students out. So what are your thoughts? How would we involve PD in those discussions?
Well, a true project management operation would include all stakeholders, which includes police and fire. And I'll give you a perfect example. And again, pointing no fingers at anyone, but if you look at the second phase of Main Street with all the dividers down Main Street on the, I guess it would be the south end towards Safeway, we weren't involved in those discussions. And when you look at how that has played out and how it's beautiful for sure, but we have a 3-block stretch there. I think it's a 3-block stretch where if there was an accident or something similar and there's a traffic jam, we're not getting turned around for 3 blocks. There's just no way that police is getting to that accident. And it's similar with fire. I mean, there's nothing we can do about that now, but those discussions would have taken place, and it may have changed things if police and fire were involved at the onset of those discussions. And so that's the example I would give. Mayor Pro Tem.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. I my own experience in Bellevue with the factory is that way. The beautiful center divider down that entire way, but you can't go into oncoming traffic. You're just stuck and don't have a way to move around.
Correct, yeah.
Thank you.
So back to your original question about the sustainability of police, and that's maybe what I would change that title to, is maybe long-term sustainability options for police services. And because again, I agree with everything that was said, including what Councilmember Naplin said. You know, we have a pretty healthy budget right now for police services, so maybe it's not a priority, but I don't think we wait to look at those options when it becomes an issue. I think we, you know, as a city, you need to be looking at it all the time. I do have a recommendation, you know, not both, but Mike, Lieutenant Sabor and myself all attended Northwestern's 22-week police staff and command college. And part of that training was we all had to do staff studies. And Lieutenant Saborin, the mayor and I assigned him to do his staff study on sustainability options for our police department. So he has a pretty good basis for what that looks like. And you know, certainly that was 2 years ago, and he'd have to dust it off and you know, talk to some other folks and maybe add additional options. But I guess I don't lose sight of that work, because you've paid for it. For you to have someone come in and do that study would probably cost you $5,000 or $10,000, and it's done. I mean, it may need dusted off and some more input, but I would recommend, you know, sometime down the road that he be afforded the opportunity at least to take it to the Public Safety Committee and let them look at it, and they can make a recommendation if it should go to council, if it's ready to go to council as a whole. But don't lose sight of it. Again, the worst thing we could do as a city is wait until there is a problem. Just don't lose sight of it, I guess, would be my recommendation, Mayor Pro Tem.
Great suggestion. I think maybe in July, we're going to put you on a committee.
And then the only other
Thank
thing,
you.
yeah, I just had one more comment on the communications. So about a year and a half, 2 years ago, staff did, and with the mayor's support, did create a communications committee, internal. And so there is groundwork there. I think maybe there's a lot of really good groundwork there, quite honestly. And again, with everything that's happened with COVID and things like that, we've kind of lost sight of it. But I think really, it's not something you're going to have to recreate the wheel. It's just a matter of taking what's there and collaborating with council and moving forward. So I don't want you to think the work isn't there or something's not in place. It is in place, and we have our PIOs and the mayor and have met several times, and there's some pretty good groundwork there if the mayor wants to touch a little bit more on that. But I just think it's a matter of, you know, bringing more people into it.
Yeah, I think, you know, our PIOs do great. You know, the work that they've done and the groundwork they've laid, they continue to increase the city's presence every year. We are at a point with, I hate to say this, but again, staffing levels that we can do more, but we're going to need probably some more time for employees to be able to do that. I think honestly on the communication side, our clerk hasn't been able to, time-wise been able to get to the website update, and this has been, 4 years. So we are at a point where I think on that communication side, what we really need to look at is, do we need a full-time communications person at the city? And that doesn't exclude the public works and police PIOs, because they have very special functions in their roles. But in that committee, that should be something that is looked at, because especially, the role of communication comes from administration, but council has things to say as well. And you need staff support and professionals to help with that. You know, there in government, there are some very nuanced things, and how you use your language to the community is critically important to keep things nonpartisan and unbiased and fact-based. And so a trained professional is really good at making sure that that's the case. I know Sean works really hard to not put any political spin or anything into his writings and what he publishes online. And that's really, really, really important for a government. I've seen when governments don't do that, and it's disastrous. It creates divides in the community, and most of the time it's unintentional. So I just, when that group gets together, I want to make sure you guys are having that discussion as well, because that's an important component. We can do anything, but we have to have the resources to do it. And so, yeah, to Carrie's point, a lot of great groundwork has been laid. The two people doing the work have gotten so good at it, it's like second nature to them. And we'll get that way with some of the council communications as well. I would love to see the council chat come back. I think there was a break for summer and COVID and everybody's getting back to school, but it would be great if that came back. I mean, that's just one key tool that's easy for council to do, and you don't need PIO help. But anyways, that's just some top of the napkin thoughts.
Great, Mayor, thank you. Chief, did you have anything else on the list?
I did not, but thank you for letting me participate.
You're welcome. Director Thomas, your thoughts on this list? Did we scare you away with that whole part with the development and growth?
Never. That has been my life for 20 plus years. I do have a couple of things to say. I talked to Councilmember Remington this morning about, we had a conversation because I looked over, the council list, and what I always call them are aspirations, goals, and alignment. How do they all kind of intersect? Because we have a budget, and then we also have staff capacity. So a little bit when I see this list, quite honestly, I'm like, ooh, that is a lot. Like, we're going to have to kind of come down to a manageable list over the next 2 years of those items, and probably prioritize and focus on them. I was thrilled once again to hear about the Parks Board. I would recommend, if you look at that code section, it's super old and needs to be redone. So I would start off small with an ad hoc committee for the parks. And and this really needs to be a joint effort between Public Works and Planning, because I do kind of the planning portion for parks, but Steve actually builds and maintains the parks. So I think that's a dual position that both he and I could hold together and make it reasonable, because he also has Public Works Committee and I also have Land Use Committee. So I think joint work will make it lighter for both of us. I would say on growth, this is how it kind of, the evolution of planning really is community building. And with community building, you get growth of people and jobs and parks and all of the things that come with it. And I would say to you is that as a legislative body, you are currently living with legislative decisions that were made in some cases 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. We do always update our comp plan because we're required to under the Growth Management Act about every 7 to 10 years. So we do keep a track of a 20-year plan, but I think the community has grown and is now asking the questions of the impacts of growth. How are those impacts affecting us? And on that note, at the next council meeting, you'll see some work from the Land Use Committee, which is 3 of our council members. They're going to bring forward a draft survey that we've been working on for just over a week. That's essentially a growth management survey, and that's directly correlated to the King County growth targets that we've been going through conversations with the county and within our caucus of essentially our size type cities since the end of October. Unfortunately, as a lot of planning works, they try to put you into a gate and say, okay, you have X amount of time to come up with a target. And we've shared that they have. I got an email this week. They want us to report back to them in 2 weeks. Obviously, we're not completely prepared, either staff wise at a committee and certainly not at a community. So it's not all going to line up with what the county's request is. So we'll have a conversation about that under the administration report next week. The land use committee's been given a lot of information, so they're going through that. We just got another updated growth target spreadsheet this week. So Larissa and I are going through that. Larissa was out for a portion of this week. She stood for her PE test. So we put that a little bit on the back burner. So she's updating that. We've also pulled out our land use and housing element to see what the alignment is, where we're really at. And that's called the Buildable Lands Report, which we don't yet have from the county, that's supposed to help assess in decision making. I will stop at growth because I could talk about that for the rest of the day. I really do believe strongly, and Carrie said this, I think we have a really good start on communications planning. The police department and public works were really involved in that, and along with the mayor a couple of years ago, it did just get kind of waylaid because, it wasn't just about staffing, it really was that we got hit with COVID. And just maybe as a gentle reminder to all of us is that I would say at least a third, if not more, of our work last year was directly related to COVID, whether it was in policy, policy making, policy implementation. And that doesn't even count what you have to do to go out in the field and inspect, and all the different protocols and procedures that were recreated, the CARES Act, the granting that we did. Like even you'll see coming up on our council agenda, I have another couple of items that are really essentially COVID related, fee reductions. So I would say we're not done. We're not out of that work yet. So I think, like I said, communications is a lot, but I want to say that I think we lost, quite a bit of time and staffing and really even resources. The other thing I would just always talk about is how do your goals, aspirations, or priorities line up with your budget and with your staffing allocation and capacity. We always have to talk about that. I have to, especially as a director and as administration. Oh, that's cute. I saw that. Let me see. I think that was really all I had to say. Thank you for allowing me to attend as well.
Laura, thank you. That 23 years, is that what you said? That's a lot of experience to bring.
Yeah, I haven't worked here for 23 years, but I have almost 25 years experience in the field now. I can't believe it, but yeah, I'm getting there.
Well, that really shows. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Naplin. Is that your hand or somebody else's hand?
That's my hand. I just wanted to jump in really quick about the communication. I feel like there's kind of two pieces of communication, and one is getting information out of the city, like what are we doing, important information. And I just want to say, when I'm talking about communication, I think our city is really working hard and doing a great job. Our PIO does a great job. Police does a great job. I mean, I'm just super impressed with that. When I'm talking about communication, clearly there's that aspect, but a lot of it is really about how does council get information, reach out to the community to make sure that the decisions we're making are aligning with what the community wants to see. And so for me, it's that getting information from the community side of communication that I'm really concerned about. And so anyway, I just wanted to clarify that. I feel like there's two directions of communication, and I really want to say the city's doing, in my opinion, a great job getting information out there. It's really about council, as we're making our decisions, just wanting to make sure we really are listening and have lots of avenues to get that feedback from the community. So anyway.
For Councilmember Naplin, that's a great point. And, a few years back, we were able to do a bunch of town halls. We hope to get to that point. We can do that again, because that's an excellent way to get a whole bunch of people all at once. Everybody gets to be there. But yeah, that's been definitely a challenge. So thanks for clarifying that and bringing it up. But yeah, I mean, I think where the city's come in communications in the last 6 years is absolutely incredible from where we're at. But there's, communication is also one of those things you can never do enough. So you can always expand, you can always do better. And so I, again, am very happy that this is becoming a focus.
Michelle Hogue and then Councilmember Langle.
I know we're kind of going long on this part of our agenda, so I'll be very quick, and I don't necessarily, need feedback right now, but I did think of something else that would be really nice to have on our list. Sorry, but it'd be nice if we had like ad hoc committee that explored better internet solutions, because it seems like our community is really asking for that. And I feel like it's a possibility, and I just don't know how or where, but I'd like to add that to our list if possible. That's all.
Yeah, I think our citizens would add that in a heartbeat. I know we've discussed it and looked at options where we can have an impact. Councilmember Langle.
Yeah, the thing that strikes me about this, and it is one of the challenges that I think cities have, is how do councils and administration work together on some of these bigger, I don't really want to use I don't want to use the word challenges. I think they're obligations, right? Particularly citizen involvement. How do we work together and still stay in our appropriate roles to, as Jennifer Naplin said, have that flow of information so that every opportunity to collaborate is taken advantage of. There's certainly things, use an example on a project basis, that is an administrative thing to handle, right? They're out there in the field. They should be reaching out to, I think Steve gave the example of 3rd Avenue in the alleys and the, breaking pipes and how that's really going to be a hot button for people. And council, when they get those calls, needs to be well-versed enough that they can help explain what the staffing challenge is and be supportive of that. And that's where having, my hope for this year, and I've said this to a couple people, is that we put away this notion that we have to compete with each other for our roles. What we really need to do is collaborate around our roles and have some, shared understanding. And, I've been through multiple trainings now. I understand my role. The question is, how do I make that appropriately mesh with the work that administration does? When I get requests from information from the community, I have a responsibility to talk to them too. So we got to figure that part out. I don't do stuff on Facebook page unless it's, I think I've said like, oh, there's a planning commission meeting, you should go to it. If somebody asks me a question, I answer it as best I can. I refer them back to administration. To me, that's, and I stick to what has been discussed in a council meeting when I'm speaking as a council member. But we still need to get better at that, because there's just not enough people to always interface with the public in a way that builds that advocacy with the community. If somebody said something to me one time, and I thought this was really sad, and I don't necessarily agree with this, okay? But they described the city as having a bunker mentality, and they didn't differentiate between administration and council. But that's not a good thing to have people feel out there. So if that is a feeling, we don't totally know, or if that's, just a few individuals, we need to work on that. I don't think anybody wants the perception of the city to have a bunker mentality and not really listening. And there's lots of opportunities with projects to demonstrate that. I've never done development without involving community, ever. I can honestly say that.
Well, thank you, Dot. Well, before we wrap this up, I really wanted to hear from Mike Block and from Jody as well. Mike, your thoughts. We have a list out there we're looking at. What do you think? Anything that you think we ought to add or take off there?
I appreciate you guys allowing me to attend today. And I kind of echo some of the stuff that the chief has already stated, we do have a community outreach team in place, under the mayor's direction, and we have done a lot of legwork. I understand the importance of community outreach and getting the community involved. And by the way, my project for the Command College was on enhancing social equality and equity. So I have that legwork done, and I have some really good ideas for the future and how to get in touch with our minority members. Our community is becoming more and more diverse, and as it does so, we need to give these people a voice in our city and find a way to tap into those folks and find out what their needs are and make sure their needs are being met. If there's something we can do as a city, we can definitely make sure that that's getting taken care of. So I have a lot of the legwork done in that realm, and I'm looking forward to implementing some of those things as we move forward as a police department. Again, it's just building on what we already have established. We have a great community outreach program. It's just, I want to make it better and continue doing what we have been doing. And I echo what the chief has said as far as getting us involved in the planning stages of some of these developments. I mean, we do have ideas to implement different types of traffic calming efforts or areas that may need, to be enhanced to get in and out of their ingress or egress of those areas. And I think it is important that we have at least a voice at the table to kind of say, did you think about this before we move forward and get these streets and sidewalks poured and we don't have any way to get there if there's an emergency. So I do appreciate you guys letting me be here. As far as these outreaching to businesses, I think that's amazing. And we're doing that as a police department. It's an all hands effort. We walk the streets, contact business owners, find out what's bothering them. And I'd be happy to, go around with you guys if anyone's interested in introduce you to folks and, start those conversations and get you involved as well in that, because we're already doing that as a police department. I think, we represent the city as well. So, I mean, if there's stuff that's coming up, we're obviously going to put that up the chain so you guys are aware of some of these items, but we're already doing some of these things that you're discussing. And I think we can build on that. And I'd be welcome to have any members join that or be part of the team and getting that going if that's something we're going to do. So again, thank you for letting me be involved, and I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Well, Jody, people ask me who runs the city. I said, Jody Wyckoff runs it. The rest of us are hanging on here. What are your thoughts, Jody?
I agree with majority of everything that's been said so far. Of course, you know that one of my hot topics, and I'm glad the mayor brought it up because I didn't even think about it at the moment that I was reading the list, is the council procedures. I think we can definitely make some small amendments to them to streamline our meetings and streamline our agenda processes and such. Specifically, I'm thinking about the 3-touch rule and if there's standing exceptions to that kind of thing. As well as putting that committee work that we did last year into, incorporating that in. It was last year, right? Time is just, I think it was October of 19 when we had our workshop about committees, and then, holidays and then COVID. So, picking that kind of stuff back up, I'm happy to sit on an ad hoc committee with a couple of you to start working on that process. I think it is low hanging fruit that could probably, be done fairly quickly. And then regarding communication, the mayor did mention that I have not had the time to work on a web update. It's a big lift. It's not just going through each page and changing some words around and stuff like that. Just an example that, just putting your agenda on the website, it takes me 10 minutes, which is not a long time. But when you look at how many pages we have and what needs to be cleaned up, and just nobody has had time to go through and clean it up. And then we need to think about, do we want to just update the design and the content, or do we want to look at a whole new, service, which of course would be more dollars than just doing a redesign. But, think about that, because I'd hate to go through the process of doing a redesign and then we decide we want to jump ship and go with a whole new provider. Because then we'd have to start all over again. And then in the previous administration, we had a consultant for communication outreach, and we got really, really close to creating some documentation standards for the city. I think it's so good if a city has a consistent look for all of the forms and letters and documents that we produce, so that when somebody sees something, they know right away that this came from City of Duval. And we got really close to getting those standards created. And then unfortunately, we had to let the consultant go. Can't remember why, but so that would be something that I would like to look at in the biennium. And I think having a consultant do help us with that would be amazing, because I don't think it would be a big lift for them. So yeah, that was pretty much my only notes on everything.
Perfect, Judy. Thank you so much. Dot, I see you've got your hand up. Do you have a brief one? Because we're going to need to move
I just
on.
want to have a quick question. I was really disappointed when that economic development study was done a couple years ago, and he really failed to meet the mayor's goals. The thing I would comment on here, and I think this is what Jody is getting at, is Duval needs to really think about its brand, because we have some really good stuff that brands Duval, and it's just never really been put together. And it affects most of what we've talked about: communication, economic development, how we lobby for things. And so I just wanted to reinforce what she said. I really feel like we need to have a consistent brand about what we're about. And I don't think it's that hard. I think we all know what a great place this is and what the photos should look like. And there are very few places you can cross a bridge and see two major mountains and mountain ranges in this county. And let's take out the Seattle bridges because they have advantages, right? But we have that advantage. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so Jody's right on. And I can understand just redoing the web page. It's too old.
Well, Dot, thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. My plan, I'll go ahead and update with your feedback, and then we'll bring it back to a cow. Rick, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to be very quick too. Just a quick response to Lieutenant Brock. I'd be very interested in going around you to the small business owners. I think that's I think that's one of the things that I've been thinking about ever since I was interested in the council. So absolutely count me in on that. The mention by Chief Hurt of early involvement with police and fire and planning. Absolutely, we need to do that. That's critical, I think. And then finally, Councilmember Lingle, your previous mention about our interaction with the public and how the council treats that, how the council behaves, some sense of uniformity there, I think is absolutely essential, as well as we increase our public outreach. That's it, Mike. Thanks.
Great, Rick. Thank you. Well, I wanted to welcome our attorney, Daniel Kinney. Daniel, thanks for joining us. We had a good discussion on, our work plan goals for the next couple of years. You've got a couple of topics. You've got both training for us as well as continuing our discussions that we had previously on just working more collaboratively and our process. I'm thinking about just taking a quick 5-minute break. Daniel, does that work for you?
Yeah, it works great. Works great for me.
All righty. I think that's important when we have these longer meetings. Originally we had 45 minutes. We were looking at going for about between 3 and 4 hours. So I think we're still doing okay time-wise. Well, let's take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll come right back. It's about 10:50. So let's be back by 10:55, and we'll get started with our attorney and our training.
Sounds good.
Back. Well, I wait to just make sure we have everybody's faces. For those of you who may not have seen it, the Association of Washington Cities puts out the City Vision magazine, and Mayor Okerlander had a great article in there Really well done. Talks about Duval. It was really, I thought, a highlight of that magazine. And I think that was from October.
I think that's when it was. And if anybody has any extra copies, I would love them because I have some family members that want them.
Well, very well done. Mayor, I thought you did such a good job talking about our city and some of the challenges we face, both with pandemic and other things that come up. Nicely done.
Thank you. It was an honor to be asked to do it. You
Great job.
don't often get to think of small town people getting those asks. So AWC is great at highlighting all of our communities.
Yeah. Well, that goes out statewide, so it was nice to see Duval highlighted. Well, with that, Daniel, thanks again for being here with us. I'll let you just march forward. Thank you.
Great, absolutely. Well, thank you so much to Mayor Pro Tem Remington for inviting me to come back to speak with you all, and thank you for welcoming me. And first and foremost, Councilmember Schaefer, nice to meet you. My name is Daniel Kenny. Welcome to the council. You've got a great group to work with, and I'm excited to work with you and to support you as you begin this adventure. So welcome.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Yeah. So we have two topics today that I've been asked to go over. And our time is relatively tight. I was scheduled from 10 to noon, and I was on for a lot of that discussion, which was wonderful. So I'm very glad that you guys had that opportunity. So I'm going to try to cut my two pieces in and split the time going forward. But please know that the first one we're going to talk about is change of form of government. That I hope is going to be just the start of your consideration and discussion. And so please know that we're going to have other opportunities should you want them to dive into this. So don't feel like the pace or the depth of this discussion is everything. It's just dipping our toes into the water, and then you can consider as a council where you want to go from here, and we'll have further discussions. And then the second component, once we get through that, is to talk a little bit more to follow up on our training. You guys have talked about a number of the things that we'll talk about already in this discussion. It's been kind of peppered in there. So we'll get to that when we get through the changes of form of government. I have a PowerPoint for this one, so I'm going to put that up on the screen. It makes it harder for me to see your faces and the raised hands. So unmute, yell your questions out, stop me at any time. Absolutely. That's how this works the best. So I'm going to go to that. Does anybody have any questions or comments before I get the PowerPoint up on the screen? No. Okay, perfect. So let me just pull that up. Okay, so do you all see the PowerPoint? And I'm going to do the presentation mode. So can you give me a thumbs up if you see just the presentation mode without the notes and section and everything?
I don't see any presentation on my screen.
Weird.
So I see the first slide, it says forms of government. It doesn't show any notes, but there is a notes section showing, Daniel.
Oh, that's what I wanted to swap that.
Yeah, I see the same thing.
Daniel, yeah, so you're showing two slides. You're showing slide number 1 and then slide number 2.
Okay, I just tried to swap that. Did that work?
Mm-mm.
We'll do it this way.
There.
Looks
Okay,
like
now I got one thumbs up. So I think now we just have the one slide.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to run through the forms of government, how the forms of government change, and then talk about some of the questions we should be thinking about as we move forward. And again, just raise your hand and let me know if you have any questions about any of the slides as we go through. So I'm going to try to go through each of the forms of government that are most common. There are a couple of others, but they're very, very uncommon. And so the first one is the mayor-council form of government. And you all are very aware of mayor-council form of government. Just a couple of quick stats that MRSC has on their webpage, and a lot of the information that I have in this presentation is from MRSC. I have links at the end of the presentation I'll send you the whole presentation so you can click on those links and do further research on your own. But as of 2010, because that was the latest that they had the numbers on the website, 228 cities had the mayor council form of government. You'll see on the next slide that far exceeds the number that have the council manager form of government. However, the percentage of the population is much closer. And the reason for that, and we'll get into this a little bit later, is that the council manager form of government is skewed to larger cities, not exclusively, by no means exclusively, and there's nothing that would dictate that or not, but that's why the percentage of population skews in one direction. So it's 58% for mayor council, and I think it's about 48% or so, or 41% because of the other forms of government. So we'll get to that in a second. And so some of the basics of this form of government, which I'm preaching to the choir, you're all part of it. Legislative authority is with the council, executive is with the mayor, popularly elected. The removal of the CEO or the mayor is by recall. Everybody has 4-year terms, and the appointment of department heads is through the mayor with confirmation through council provided. So this is what we're all used to and we're comfortable with. The one thing that you all are exploring in the next 2 years is the hiring of a city administrator in addition to the mayor to help run on the administrative side. You know, I think in the budget, it's part-time for this year, full-time for next year. So that's going to be a position that is going to look a lot like the city manager and the council manager form of government, somebody that is, you know, hired to do those administrative tasks for the city. It's not explicitly identified here because you don't need to have that, but that's certainly a component. So removal of department heads is with the mayor. The mayor does have a veto power on ordinances in some situations. It's a very nuanced and frankly confusing statute that talks about that, but that does exist. Policy development, the mayor can propose policy development, bring it forward to council. Council obviously would then make the decision on that. And then the implementation of that policy is with the mayor. And so some of those the principles that we're talking about here are separation of powers. You have a popularly elected executive and legislative branch. You do have political leadership in the form of the mayor, and you have a strong central executive. And so I think what's one of the things that's interesting about this form of government is that most people, certainly not going to speak you know, across the board, but view government as having an elected mayor and then a legislative branch. And so when you deviate from that form, sometimes people get confused on who truly is running the city and how the city operates. We'll get to that here in a second. That is certainly very popular. You can overcome that pretty easily. Once you get something in place, people understand after time how that works. But that's one of the things that is noted, is that this is what people think of when they think of government.
Hey, Daniel, you said this was more popular with larger cities. Any idea at all with cities the size of Duval, how common the mayor council form of government is?
So that's actually a fantastic question. I could probably find that. I don't have that today. I'm the city attorney for 3 cities. All 3 cities have gone through this exercise in the last 18 months. It's something that is of interest from time to time. And my client Gig Harbor had a presentation from MRSC, and they had that number. They have a list of all the cities and their forms of government, and then pulled by population, and was able to identify the number. You're different than Gig Harbor, so I can't give you that number straight away, but I could get that. But again, more often, it's the council manager form of government that's skewed to slightly bigger cities, rather than the mayor council. So, and that's why if you look on here, only for the council manager, 52 cities have that form of government. And then if we just go back a slide, 228 were mayor.
I see. Yeah.
And the 228 is 58%, but the 52 is 42%. And that's because A lot of them are bigger cities. Again, that there's no requirement for that. That's not necessary. That just it's how it works. Is that some of them?
Yeah, what I'm really looking for, not so much the number, the percentage or number of cities that have it, but I think you'll get to this today. But essentially, for a city the size of Duval, or Duval in particular, what are the pros and cons of the different forms of government? And I suspect your training here will help us with that.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we'll talk about it after this as well. But yeah, that's what we'll get to here.
Sure.
So for the council manager form of government, and again, I'm going to kind of go through some of this fairly quick. You have an appointed manager, city manager, that is the executive authority and does the administration of the city. That is selected by the city council and hired by the city council. It's also removed by a majority vote of the city council. And so being hired by the city, the term is indefinite. And so you could have a city manager that is with the city for 9 months. You could have a city manager that's with the city for 19 years. And those examples are out there across the board. And city councils can have different goals and objectives and want to work and with different styles and what have you. And so you could have different city managers, but you could also have somebody that just knows and runs the city really well and that sticks around for a long time. Of course, the tenure of council remains at that 4 years. And so instead of having kind of an ongoing circulation of elected officials in the city, one side of the equation for the administrative side of it would remain constant, subject to obviously hiring and firing by the council. So the appointment of the department heads is by the manager without council confirmation. It's because the manager runs the city and that manager is then hired to do that. Same with removal. The manager does not have a veto, so that is very different. And for policy development, manager can recommend but not really propose or move it forward. So really the manager is working for the council and it's an employee of the council is one way to term it. And so the structure of the city just looks much different. We're gonna get into some pros and cons of this, but probably the biggest consideration is when you have 7 council members that are dictating the operations of the city to a city manager, how does that city manager and that city council coordinate their communications to make sure that they are able to communicate back and forth in a way that results in clear directive for that city manager? Does the manager talk to every council member every week for every issue? Does the city manager wait exclusively for a vote from council at a council meeting? That is a big difference in that they do work for the council, and that's a body of 7. And so I think that the management of that relationship takes a little bit more getting used to. But again, all of that in theory would sort itself out once this form of government gets established in the city and becomes the norm, as opposed to what you have now. And again, that individual, the city manager, would be hired based upon their professional experience and being a city manager. Again, very similar though to the city administrator, which is something that would exist on the mayor council form of government and would do a lot of the same work. To be quite honest, those individuals typically are the same. Most city managers or city administrators have had opportunities to work in the other position. Of course, not all of them, but it's not uncommon that you would have one and the same. So again, there's much more to all of this, but does anybody have any questions just at this moment that's percolating to the top?
Daniel, I have one.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm getting in the weeds too quick here. I know we're like, 2 slides in. So just tell me if it's going to come later, but under the appointment of department heads, so the council doesn't confirm a manager's decision, but can I assume that the council is involved in the hiring at some point, or at least interviewing?
They could be, but the manager is the professional hired to do that, and so would not need to be.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and of course, it really what it does is it creates almost in a way more of a separation between council and the manager, but increases the council's ability to control that manager. And I know that that seems odd, but it's kind of it's a different dynamic that's being established that way. And so I'll keep rolling through here, but please do interrupt.
I have a question, and so does Dorothy. I don't know, you probably can't see us.
I can't, yeah, absolutely. Just please do yell out.
So on both of the slides under policy development, it makes statements like manager can recommend, and I can't remember what it said on the other one. Could you roll back one slide?
So both of them should be on the screen right now.
Oh, good. Mayor can propose, manager can recommend. I just wanted, and maybe it's because it's obvious, council can also bring up policy. You know what I mean? Because that is technically our role. I just wanted to, it almost sounds like, well, it's the role of the mayor to propose it or the manager to recommend it. It's saying it's allowed, but council can drive policy development. We don't need to sit back and wait for someone to propose or recommend.
That's correct. Yes. And this is was primarily intended to focus on that role of the mayor or the city manager. And in a lot of situations, it is going to be the city manager or the mayor, city administrator, or directors that are pushing things forward that then you would consider, parks policy development largely is going to come from staff first that you'll then work with. But of course, as all councils do, and you guys included, you find things and you push them forward. You have a great list of them as well from your last presentation. So yes, thank you so much. Councilmember Lingo, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
Yeah, first one to confirm. I don't see anything on this list, and this is to Councilmember Naplin's point. Council could still have committees that work directly with the city manager under that form of government. And unless you're telling me different. But the other one is, I'm curious if a smaller city, and you may not be able to answer this, and this is an MSRC question, but I'm curious if smaller cities like Duval that are undergoing a huge amount of growth and change and need for internal reflection and perhaps significant modification, if the shifting from one form of government to the other is potentially been driven by that, because I can see that the change process can get really rocky. That's the nature of change, and that one form of government might be working in those situations more frequently than others.
So
do we know if the trend for small cities under growth pressures are doing more city managers, for example? Because we're considered, I think, that under AWC, we're like the 19th fastest growing city, and we're small.
Yeah.
Richfield's another example. I think they're at the top of the list. I don't know if they have city manager or not.
Yeah, so for your first question, you still have the ability to do committees and still have the ability to work with the city manager in that way. But again, the city manager would be working for the council as a whole, so that committee wouldn't be able to drive direction to the city manager. So that makes that kind of coordination piece, important. How are you going to make that work? Does the city manager have to have meetings all the time to get that direction? And the presentation that MRSC gave to Gig Harbor indicated that it was their assessment, and I hope I'm capturing this correctly if they happen to watch this, but my understanding is that, the vast majority of the times that cities consider a changing form of government, it's largely centered around something, right? Something that drives this feeling that they should change it. But many times that doesn't push it all the way, and really it needs to be a thoughtful approach to what's in the best interest of the city. And you guys are doing that by having discussions and everything, so I get that. But it's typically a political fight or something like that ends up pushing it. And I have a slide here in a second that will show the ebb and the flow of the forms of government. And to be quite frank, it's much less than you'd think in the last 20 years. Not many cities have done it. And that's because people get set into their form of government and they work with it. There isn't, in my view, there is not one that is better than the other. They are both absolutely valid and useful, forms of government. As you can see, there's many cities that use both. And so really it just takes a thoughtful look at it. But your point is well taken. The growing pains of doing the change, and we'll talk about that in another slide, are very real and need to be considered, because just getting from A to B can be a rough transition period that needs to be very thought out. And that's what we're doing here today. And so I'll just, sorry, I got to move my. So we'll talk very briefly about how you change the form of government. There's two ways. It's by a council resolution or by a petition of the voters. Under either scenario, that just triggers the proposed change to go to the next general election or special election held prior to the general election. So what you would be doing is you would be either being asked by the residents of the city to put it on the ballot, or you would be indicating an interest to put it on the ballot, and then the people decide. So this city council doesn't have the authority to change the form of government, only to put that ball in motion should you choose to. And so here's the changes of form of government in the kind of recent past, if you will. On the left side is the changes from council manager, which you have to council, from council, mayor council to council manager. So the transition that you would be considering taking. And then on the other side of the screen, on the right side, is going the opposite direction. And so certainly some cities have decided to do this in the last 20 years, but it really has not been that many. And I think there's a reason for that. Again, another one of my clients, Mukilteo, a year and a half ago, explored it, got it on the ballot. It did not move forward. Largely, I think, in my view, it was because people wanted to have a mayor that they could call and say, I elected you to run this city in the way that you said you were going to run it. And having that kind of figurehead is a desirable thing. But certainly cities have done it. So it's there. And then, so when is it effective? This is an important thing to consider. The language is essentially upon the election, qualification, and assumption of office of the officers. That's the council members. Because you already have the council members in place, it's going to become effective when the election is certified. That's a really, really important thing for this group to consider. Because what that means is the change of form of government will take effect a matter of weeks after the election. And so what you're going to have to do, and we'll talk about this more in our considerations, is do all of the work to prepare for that change of form of government, not knowing if it's going to go through. And so that's a lot of work. And if it goes through, then you have it ready and you take those couple of weeks to get it, teed up so that when it happens, you've got everything in place. That also can be lost time and money for the city to do that, but it's something to consider.
I have a question.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm trying to understand, because we have embedded in our code so much, shall we say, council has a lot of power with our code. And if we were to go to this transition, obviously we'd have to really change all of that. And it's throughout the whole code. Is that, how do you do that? I'm trying to figure out, how do you do that in a matter of weeks? Like scrub your code and change that, and how does that work?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the thing to think about. And my recommendation is that it would be done in advance, and it would not be done in those weeks between the election and the certification. It would be done in the months ahead of time. And you would do a code audit and work with probably a consultant. I don't think staff is going to have a capacity to do a project of this magnitude. Defer to the mayor and your directors on that. But this is it's a big undertaking. There's not going to be huge sections of the zoning code or something like that that get blown up. That's not going to happen. But who makes a decision, how council does something and interacting with the executive. There's going to be nuanced things throughout the code that would need to be changed. So I absolutely don't mean to imply that the whole code's going to be rewritten. That's not the case. But somebody's going to have to go through and make sure that it works under the potential new form of government, and so that those the procedures and the authorities are all in place. And of course, there's many codes out there as examples that can be used to pull through that information. Okay, so so I recommend that would be prepared in advance, just in case it goes through, because we won't know. A couple of interesting notes, just because they always blow my mind when I see them. If you do change over to the council manager form of government, the mayor, whoever that is, when that transition happened, joins as an 8th council member until the end of what their mayoral term would have been. So that could be a short period of time, or that could be 4 years, depending on when the change of form of government goes through. That means that could result in 4-4 ties. There is no veto power of the city manager. And so that means that those pieces of legislation, whatever policies trying to be implemented, would not pass and would die. And so that potentially could get problematic. There are situations where the mayor pushes something like the change of form of government through and then decides to drop off, and so it's still seven members, or the mayor stays on and becomes an active part of that group until the next election. So it's just a nuance. And then it's important to.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So who becomes the mayor? Is the mayor pro tem the mayor, or is the mayor the mayor?
A great question. It's my next bullet point there. Because there is a mayor, and the mayor is largely a ceremonial mayor. There's 2 options. The mayor can either be selected by the city council, or a city council position can be designated as the mayor and then can be elected. I think you have to, if I recall correctly, it has to be you have to do it, and then it would be at the next election, so it wouldn't be at the first one. And so this is one of the things that becomes a little bit confusing for the public, because you do still have somebody that is the mayor. Again, largely ceremonial, can act in emergency. So it would be fairly similar to the mayor pro tem position that you currently have right now, but with a little bit more authority in emergency situations. But again, that person is still just your standard member of the council, same voting powers, has no more authority on administration or anything like that. It simply has kind of a ceremonial representative capacity if there's a ribbon cutting or a city, representing to AWC. Councilmember Lingle, I could see your hand, and if I can't see, I can see about 5 people. So if there's anybody else, but go ahead, Councilmember Lingle.
I'll try to use the symbol more. One of my thoughts about this ceremonial is that council, even now, identifies people to show leadership on behalf of the city for a variety of committees and other regional activities, right? And you haven't showed me anything that would take that away. So in the case of our mayor, she has a great deal of expertise in various committees that are external to the city, but she still represents the city just like other ones do. So that's a similarity. But I'm not seeing anything here that would necessarily mean that some of the things that she is doing now, advocating for policy or whatever, would have to necessarily go away, given that other members of council have similar roles in other types of, regional or whatever committee.
Yep.
Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, and Daniel, if I may, most of the mayors that I know in council manager forms of government put in pretty much full-time hours doing the advocating, and they're the lead the lead person for the city. So the city manager isn't out there going and testifying, it's the mayor or council, but the mayor is the primary person responsible for doing that. So really, besides being kind of the president and the council, in most cities, those people just really take the lead role on advocacy and working at the regional level. So, but it doesn't preclude council from doing what council already does. So there's the advantage there is that the mayor doesn't have the administrative duties, and that frees that person up. So if you are able to pay them appropriately for the time they put in, they can put in a significant amount of time outside of the city doing good work.
Can I follow up on that? I mean, that's an important nuance to me, because in a small city like Duval that is going through a lot of rapid change, we want to retain as much talent as we can in the process of a shift like this. We don't want to lose capacity. And so if I was to support, you know, a city manager form of government, I would really want that component, you know, I don't want to use the word protected, but, you know, to the extent appropriate, preserved, because you don't want to disrupt your overall team in the middle of a transition. That really would not make sense to me anyway. And I realize, you know, the role of the city manager, I mean, everybody's got to be clear about what they're doing, but it still would make sense to me to have that capacity as much as possible stay in place. I mean, I've always said, people have heard me say this forever. I believe every person has a blessing or a special talent. And I wouldn't want to see those blessings or special talents get lost in a transition.
Great, absolutely. And again, I can only see 5 people, so please do unmute and yell out your questions. So I'm going to keep going here. So some things to consider. We've talked about a number of these, but who will take the lead in analyzing the code, policies, and operations to determine what changes are needed? Again, largely that's going to need to be done in advance of the election, because once it's certified, it is in effect. So you don't have the opportunity to put an effective date on it or anything like that. So that's I know that you've put some money into the budget for the consideration of this. And you know, I would encourage you to talk to some consultants about who could do this. The city manager group, the organization, you know, has some people that are, you know, longtime city managers, retirees that can provide some input and things on this. One thing to consider, just because it's a nuance that both Gig Harbor and you all are dealing with in terms of just timelines, is if it's a mayoral election a year, and so you have the mayor on the ballot, and should you choose to move forward and put this on the ballot at the same time, what kind of candidates are you going to get, and how's that going to work? If the position of mayor could go away, are people going to run to be the mayor in that election, spend the time and the money to go through that? So just kind of a sequential thing to consider. And then what other priorities for the year may need to be put on hold? You had a great list of your priorities, and, you know, adding something that is fairly large, both, you know, to get it changed, but then also once it is changed, as Councilmember Lingle said, you know, there's growing pains, and, you know, there's going to have to be a recognition that everything's going to be a little bit different. And I know also that the council or the city is anticipating hiring a city administrator part-time this year, full-time next year. You know, how's that going to work with the potential for then needing a city manager instead of a city administrator? Could be the same person. Is that person interested in taking that role on? Would you be interested in just transitioning that person? You certainly are going to want somebody there on day one to do the work of the city. So if you, for example, and all hypotheticals, but if you did move forward with this during 2021 and you only have a part-time city administrator, you're going to need a full-time person, because you're no longer going to have the mayor working the amount that she works, and then you'll only have a part-time city administrator. So just a lot of procedural kind of sequential stuff to think through. And then, you know, the size of the city, how does that impact potential city manager candidates and or their retention? I don't have any statistics on this, but city managers do work at many different jurisdictions throughout their career. Some are fortunate enough to stay at their city for very long periods of time. But you'd want to talk to city managers and see, is Duval a place that you're going to get somebody for, you know, 7 to 10 years, or are you going to get somebody for 3 years because they want to move up and go to, you know, Tukwila or wherever it may be to have that next job. And so these are important considerations. And again, I think all of these questions can be answered by just further due diligence in advance of making a decision to put it on the ballot. So those are just a handful of things to consider. I've got some resources at the end that will point to additional questions right here. So the forms of government are outlined by MRSC on their website. Again, I'm going to provide this presentation so you'll be able to click that hyperlink. You don't have to write down the long form there. That'll give you information on the forms of government. MRSC also has a common issues memo, if you will, that gives pros and cons of each form of government. And of course, just like myself, MRSC has no interest in one way or the other. And so they should provide what they've heard from the communities in the Northwest on what those pros and cons are. So that's a great document to read. I've of course only touched on a few of those things that are included there. So I encourage you to read that. The statutes that govern the change, or the council manager, the mayor, council, and the change in form of government are listed here as well. Of course, you don't need to read those, and I'm more than happy to discuss those or to dive into any of those details on what's included there. And so that's that. So I can see you all, I'm going to stop screen sharing. Okay, so I think that got me back. Okay, so that was a lot of information pretty quickly. So now that I can see you all, does anybody have any questions about how this works? Yeah, Councilmember Bernicki.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I've known some cities that have gone through quite a few transitions of city managers in a short period of time. And I guess because they're sort of like the CEO of the group in a way, how do we manage those responsibilities or that leadership if we're in transition and there's no one there? Like, how does that work?
It's a great question, and that's just going to be a manner of management, right? And so you're going to have people on staff. You may, you know, if you look at your budget, let's look at 2022. You're going to have a full-time city administrator, and then you've got the mayor that works a lot as well. And so the replacement of those two individuals with city manager may mean that you'd have a city manager plus an assistant city manager, or some other, you know, form of support for that individual, totally depending on how you work that out. But you know, the process to hire a city administrator or city manager is extensive. Those searches are going to be much broader than the Puget Sound region, and take months to complete to find the right person. And so if you find yourself in a position of needing to go through that again, whether it's by your choice or that individual has left, there are periods of time where there's significant transition that happens. And of course, that can happen with a city administrator as well. And then of course, a mayor can be elected each 4 years. So, you know, there is transition inherent in you know, local government, but it is important because that's the person that's doing everything. And so having that person in place, there's a high priority on that.
Can I just say something? When we did the city administrator hiring, it was extremely extensive and we went out of state. And so I'm assuming that if we were to go to city manager, we would be doing that same sort of process to that level.
Yeah, I think your observation, Diane, is that they're not a dime a dozen, right? It takes a high level of expertise and experience to serve such a role. And I'm sorry, I was speaking out of turn, but just a comment, I guess, based on everything you've said, Daniel. I think based on the fact that it would take time and money to make this transition, Duval and the council would need a very compelling reason that it needs to be done. Now, one of those compelling reasons might be that it's desired by our citizens. If so, you know, fine, that's something we need to consider. But barring that, there has to be other reasons we'd want to make this change, distinct advantages of what the council believed were distinct advantages in going from one form to another. So far, I haven't heard any of those. If there are, I think that's something that obviously we need to discuss in detail.
Councilmember Napland.
I just wanted to respond to what Councilmember Schaefer mentioned, and that's something that we haven't really discussed. And I don't think the intent of your presentation was to, you know, maybe talk about those things. And so I'm just trying to figure out how to proceed. I would say I have seen documents that talk about the pros and cons, and some of the reasons a city might change is, you know, you want your city to be run professionally. And, you know, when you have a political position that can change based on political, you know, I mean, someone could get elected who has no management experience, no financial experience, and literally they're making all the decisions on who to hire, fire, how to, you know, I mean, it's like having the, you know, someone running a large corporation and just letting, you know, just anyone could come in and take control, and then it would be, decisions sometimes become political, which really, you know, shouldn't necessarily be political decisions in a way. I don't know how, I'm not being very good at explaining it, but I think even Mayor Okerlander can see, you know, the pros and cons. And, you know, our mayor right now has a lot of experience, but, you know, we've had times in Duval's history where, you know, you could get a mayor elected that really doesn't have that kind of management experience. And it can, you know, bring a lot of disruption. And anyway, maybe some more people want to pipe in. There's definitely pros and cons, but I would say that would be one reason where if that position becomes very political and disruptive, do you really want that person to be, you know, running the administration of a city?
Yeah. Yeah, Councilmember Napland hit the nail on the head. And I think one of the challenges that a city like ours has is that, frankly, over the last decade or so, the role of local elected officials has increased dramatically. And the need to spend significant time serving on regional committees and being out advocating is greater than it ever has been. And one of the challenges with a smaller city is, to Councilmember Napland's point, is getting somebody with experience and background. And it's really critical, whoever is running the city has a really core understanding of how government operates, what the role is and what the role of the mayor is, how to manage staff. And so there, you know, that's one of the really big pros for a city like ours. There's cons as well, but that's, you know, that's what I've been talking about for the last several years. Is this is one of the reasons. You know, I can say no fault to the previous electeds in the city, but they had a very different background than I have, and I came in and there's all of these things that still need to be fixed, or not necessarily fixed, but updated and changed. And they just weren't on the radar. So you could end up with somebody where their priority is getting big projects done at the behest of keeping your sewer operating properly. And so there's those types of things, and that does become political as well. So there's a lot to discuss, but that's just kind of a, you know, I think a brief, Jennifer really summed it up well, is one of the key reasons why you might want to switch.
Councilmember Hoag, you had your hand up.
So I think that is one of the advantages to switching, is that our pool of people for this position is all over the US. We can, we're not just
Mhm.
looking for someone to run the city that lives within the city limits. So I think that's an advantage. I do have a question for Mr. Kenny. So Councilmember Schaefer brought up a really good point that really it's up to the community, right? And we don't know how they feel. Can we do an advisory vote? So then we're not spending the time and money to, make this change without it being even voted. If we did an advisory vote, then we could spend the money because we have a feeling that they're going to vote yes and then still go on to the ballot later. Is that a possibility?
To be totally honest with you, I've had only one client do an advisory vote a number of years ago, so I haven't been involved with those. I think the way that the structure of the change of form of government is that if the public is interested, they can collect signatures. I'd have to pull up the slide. I think it's 10% of the last general municipal election. And so that's one way that the public can express that to you. But then, of course, you can have a very public process in advance of passing any resolution to get that input on it as well. I'm happy to look into the advisory vote, but again, I've only seen that used once. There are costs involved with that as well to have ballot.
There is, yeah, but doing just a survey isn't really going to give you the true feeling of the whole community. You're just getting the people that saw the survey. We know that's not always, so it's just an idea. I'd love to know if it's possible.
Yeah, and I think, just one caution for me is I would advise, or I would recommend that you would do all of the information gathering and providing to the public in advance of that you would do anyway. And that takes a lot of time and money as well, because an advisory vote, when they are just thinking, do I want a mayor or do I not? Or am I reacting to the current mayor or am I not? Which are things that come up. You're going to want to make sure that you do all of the information providing to the public so that when they give you that for certain what they want. I think that's, maybe I'm just speaking personally, when I vote on advisory things on ballots, typically I don't know as much about those and it's harder for me to provide my own opinion. But yeah, I can look into that for sure. And just one comment, and again, I have no interest either way for either form of government, and clearly there's support for both and potential changes here. But with the mayor council form of government, many cities, the city administrator does all of the work, and it's largely going to end up looking a lot like council manager, and the mayor in some situations virtually is unpaid and is just the figurehead as well. Of course, involved with the preliminary budget and sitting and running council meetings, et cetera, but the degree to which the mayor runs the city in a mayor council form of government can vary, and you can set that up to be very successful with a city administrator and a mayor that is accountable to the public, being voted in, and that does those necessary administrative functions. But the day-to-day operations with the directors is with the city administrator. And so I think if you wrote down a list of your objectives, honestly, I think you could satisfy most all of your objectives with both. And whether that's some changes, which you're already thinking about doing with a city administrator hire, or whether that's a change of form of government. So, that's just something to consider, is that, those boxes can be checked in both, in my view. Councilmember Lingle, I'm sorry, Councilmember Remington, I haven't heard from you yet.
Thank you, Daniel. So you were involved with a city that went for a change and the voters voted it down. I wasn't interested in why they voted it down. I'm interested in cost. We set aside some money in the budget, and I've heard anywhere from, you can do it for 50,000, you can spend $250,000, depending on your codes and hiring a consultant, the process, the election, and so on. Do you have a sense what the other city had in their budget or paid out to make the change, although it wasn't successful, but they must have set up for it? Do you have a sense of what they needed funding?
So I don't think I have a specific number. No, they used internal staff for a lot of what they, went through with the code preparation and everything. They also had a city administrator on staff, so they were more prepared for that. So from your perspective, I think if you were headed that way, you would probably want to consider hiring the full-time city administrator before that, so do that in 2021 rather than 2022, because you want somebody full-time ready to run the city, and you wouldn't have to then go through a hiring process. And so I think there's additional costs there that you may not need if that doesn't happen. And then for you all, and again, just my assumption, but I could be wrong. Likely a lot of the advanced work you'd want a consultant to do because of staff availability and what they can take on themselves. It still is going to mean that they're going to be involved with that consultant to provide input. So I don't have it. And then also whether it's a special election or a general election has increased costs if you're putting on the election or if you're jumping on an election. So I don't have that specific number. I know MRSC was asked that as well in their presentation last month, and if I recall correctly, they punted on it as well because it really depends on the needs of the city.
Yeah, just a follow-up question, maybe a comment. It seems ironic that one reason we would go to it is stability. So you can get a city manager that could be here, but being a small town, and we see that in the police department, we hire really good folks. But they want to be able to go to a place where they have more opportunity and maybe more pay. So we also run the risk of, shooting for stability, but losing that as people might resign and move on. And I just, it seemed like that was one of the things that we have to consider that is key.
Yeah, I think that's an important consideration. And you guys are going to be fortunate, as Councilmember Lingle said earlier, as soon as candidates come in from wherever they're coming from and visit your city and see where they could live and work, I'm sure they're going to love it. It's beautiful. It's a great place to be. And you've got people from all over the Puget Sound that want to live in your community. That's why you're growing so much. But, professionals, particularly from other states, there's a lot of factors that go into that, and family moves or other opportunities, whatever that may be, could result in changes. And so it's less a change of mayor and it's more an actual hiring process that you have to go through, and that costs a lot of money and takes time. And again, I can't say whether that's going to be every 2 years or every 20 years. And one would hope that it would be every 20 years, but you just never know. So Councilmember Lingle, sorry, you had a comment.
Well, couple ones. If you have an 8-member council, you're going to need 5 votes to have a majority. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing in a city manager form of government. I can see some real advantages to that because it forces decision-making to be far more in consensus. That's on that. As this has been described, frankly, if you want a good city administrator, good city manager, I don't really see a lot of difference in cost. You're going to have a recruitment process. You're going to be prepared to pay a wage that you can afford. You're going to have to provide an environment, which I believe you all can do, that is exciting and desirable in terms of where they live. So I don't see a lot of difference there either. For me, the dilemma Duval is facing, and it ties to growth, but it is not exclusively that, is that the mayor that preceded our current mayor, and I still have a copy of the mayor's State of the Union, so to speak, letter from the fall of 2018, is there was a lot of stuff that she inherited that should have been done differently, should have been done in a more business-like way, and it simply didn't get done. And if the mayor and Diane can correct me, it is unclear to me how much of that was even explained or notified to council. And I can think of a number of things that they've explained to us or informed us about, and I have no reason to doubt them. So the thing is there are components of Duval that we don't have right now. And it is still being very costly for us to get through those things. And at the end of the day, we still have a business to run, which is the city of Duval. And we still have politics to negotiate regionally. So my understanding, and I don't have a lot of understanding of city manager form of government, but what I understand it to be remains, it's not a quick process, first of all. And to your point, if you're seriously considering doing this, when you go out to the public, you really need to present to them an idea and a comprehensive strategy for how you are still going to operate. It's not like, hey, we're going to hire a city manager and all will be well. No, you have to be able to explain to them what will change and what will not. And that is the best way to have consensus from the beginning, I think, from administration and council. This is not a decision that should be about politics. We're trying to get away from politics if we do this. We're trying to get to a real business-based approach, because in this state, financing a city is extremely difficult and nobody is giving us a break. Every year, planning comes to us with more and more requirements, and we have no way to finance them. And our mayor is out there needing to deal with all this other stuff and those politics. It's an incredible amount for a city to deal with, and it's not, I don't see it getting any better. I mean, even if, you know, the new federal administration, you know, starts being more supportive of local government, there's a lot of resources that still won't come to Duval because of our demographics. So we're going to have challenges, and some, you know, if we stayed with the current form, you know, I guess a question would be, to stay in that form, what can we do in more collaboration with administration around the functions of the city administrator? So we don't end up in a situation that our mayor inherited, where there were elements that were unsatisfactory given all that had happened before. And we've all talked about those things, you know, not, you know, necessarily executive things. I mean, she inherited a bunch of stuff that was half done, stuff that wasn't done correctly, things for her to unravel, where, you know, she thought she was doing the right thing, but maybe it was something different that she could have done. I mean, this was not, and this was a mayor that was here a long time. So, you know, if you stay with city administrator, that collaboration, the infrastructure we have, we really have to make an investment in that too. I don't see us getting away from that as a growing small city, quite frankly. I think it doesn't matter whether you have a city manager or stay with the current form. We're not going to escape those growth pains. And I do think this will take time.
And so I think there's,
the mayor has comments on it, but I still have her letter. And I wouldn't even have, well, I didn't want to be on council because, and I think that year I was the only citizen that commented on her budget. Am I remembering that, Mayor Okerlander?
I think you're right, actually.
I said there wouldn't be as many ribbon cuttings. That was one of my phrases. It's not going to be as sexy to be mayor.
Nope. We're focusing on the basics.
so a few follow-up comments to that, just very quickly. The 8 council members is just for the term of the mayor, and then that drops off, obviously. And you're right, the qualifications and the search for a city administrator, which you're going to do, you budgeted for it, and a city manager are largely the same. So probably the same people, maybe some differences, but largely the same. And so once you go through that process, which it sounds like there's a push to do, you're going to have that person working for the city. And the question is, do you also have an elected mayor, or do you not have an elected mayor? And so, you know, when you kind of break down those things, you kind of get it a little bit smaller in scope, because you're going to have somebody with that executive professional experience working for the city either way, or at least that's the goal. And it's true that the two forms are a little bit more of a business model and a little bit more of a political model, but the political model still has the business model in it because of that city administrator. And so just want to, yeah, the great points. Councilmember Hoag, I think I saw your hand, unless you're
Just
screening.
briefly, one thing I thought about when Councilmember Langle was talking was, and this is something that was talked about many years ago, and maybe Councilmember Brodnicki and Mayor Okalander can weigh in on this, but I think that if we had something that the mayor's term could only be, they could only fill 2 terms, have a term limit, that might have helped some of the problems that we had, because I think our previous mayor was mayor for 16 years or something like that. And that's a long time, you know, so there was a lot to unravel. So I don't know, it's just something to bring up.
So Councilmember Naplin, you raised your hand very quickly, but couldn't tell if you're.
Super quick. I think the difference, you're right, you would, in both forms of government, if you choose to have a city administrator, you know, you do have somewhat of a professional role as you would have with a city manager. I think where I see the difference, and from experience with our city, is the city administrator reported to a single political figure. And so at times, and I, you know, maybe Mayor Okalander and Councilmember Brodnicki could respond to this, but I got the impression that sometimes the actions of the administrator were also political due to the fact that they were reporting to that person. And so I see that as a little tricky, because, you know, with a city manager, you know, that person reports to 7 members of council in the public. You know, I mean, at council meetings, things are discussed, this and this. But, you know, there's a lot of behind the scenes things that can happen between a mayor and a city administrator that is unknown to the public. And political aspirations and direction a mayor wants to take can be directed to the administrator to do. And so in the end, the mayor still makes the decisions of, you know, who to hire, fire, you know, certain things, and directs the administrator to carry them out a certain way. So I do think that there is a difference still. Anyway.
Absolutely. Councilmember Brodnicki, and Councilmember Remington, you both have raised your hand a couple times. So
I'll just be real quick. It's a logistical question for today. You mentioned 12 noon. Do you have a hard stop at noon, Daniel?
No, I have a meeting. I can be late to that. I know we have our other topic. I don't think we're gonna, you know, really, you know, get into that. So I'm happy to tee it up and kind of get people thinking. I've got some questions and thoughts. But I'm pretty open to what you want to do. I had anticipated that one being the length of this one, and this one being a little bit shorter. It's a big topic as well, don't get me wrong. Yeah. So yeah, I defer to you all on what you want to do.
Yeah, if you have time to tee it up, that might be helpful for us to think about questions, and then we can work on it, maybe have you back at a cow to really get back in depth. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Brodnicki.
Yeah, so Mayor Okalander and I worked on this for years, and I do think that 2 considerations with our current form is the fact that we're such a small city, and it looks like we're not really wanting to grow super big. So from our population, trying to get the talent that had the appropriate knowledge and understanding to run this city is going to be slim pickings. And then 2, we don't pay our mayor for the degree of responsibility we expect from them. So that's the second problem we have. So going forward, I think it's inevitable that we're either going to go to city manager or administrator. And the whole point of us years back doing the administrator was for the purpose of us slowly transitioning to see what that looked like with our current form. It was like our stepping stone. And so I think once you get the administrator in and you can see how that really works, it will help. But I'll be honest, even with a city manager, politics is politics. And I have seen city managers get churned through like no other with cities. A lot of drama. You can't take it out. It's government. There's a council, there's politics. So I think you'll want to really think about the mitigation of those things when you're weighing them. And I think that having a very robust meeting to really look at not just a sheet of pros and cons, but look at us as a city and how do those pros and cons weigh for how we're set up, because we're never going to be a huge city. So we're never, the talent we get is very limited. So we have to expect that we're going to go outside of even the state of Washington for hiring. And if you churn through, we're a small city, so yeah, we become a stepping stone for people who want that kind of job are aspirational, and they tend to want to get their leg in and move up. So we have to just accept the fact that when we get these managers, it's going to be shorter term than what we would think. And so we have to budget for that. That's all.
So robust discussion today. So great. I'm happy to be part of your discussions in whatever way that you want going forward. You guys have had all the key points are out there. You know what you're looking at and what you're thinking about, and it's just going to take a little bit more time to process that. So I look forward to assist you in that in whatever way you need. So I think with that, we'll probably put this component aside for now, unless anybody jumps in with final questions or thoughts or anything. And I will send you the PowerPoint with the links to go do further reading if you want to. Again, MRSC came to Gig Harbor and gave a presentation. A retired, longtime Puget Sound city manager and city administrator came to speak as well, just from a personal experience standpoint. And so there are opportunities for you all to get perspective from others as well. And I can help facilitate that if there's any desire for that. And of course, the mayor, Jody, others can reach out to those resources as well. Okay, well, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pivot, and I am going to do this pretty quick. And so the next portion of this, and Councilmember Schaefer, you didn't have the opportunity to participate in the first part of the training, but we were trying to kind of further conversations about how the city is going to develop and kind of grow as a team with communication, and to really take the next step to work and function properly and positively for attaining the goals of the city. Lots of things on those lists, lots of things in the budget to accomplish. And so this is discussion number 2. And, a couple of quick reminders. All cities should be doing these conversations. And so I would encourage you all to consider this, as you already have, because you've invited me back for a second time, for continued conversation and continued development and evolution of how you all work together. And so keep it going. It's a great thing. And second of all, and I know I kind of said this in the last presentation, which I believe was at the end of September, I think it was. You made it through the budget season, and you made it through 2020. Congratulations. That was really hard. And, I work with, a dozen or more cities on a regular basis, and it was a really challenging year. And I know we talked about that a little bit at the last time we were together, but you made it through. The kind of the sobering reality is that 2021 is going to be a challenging year as well. And so one of the first things that I kind of wanted to talk about was, and again, largely not get into it in too much detail right now, but to think about is, what are those things that we learned from 2020 that we can pull forward into 2021? Because you're going to have a lot of the same challenges. And you've had the opportunities to struggle and succeed through a lot of those things. Fortunately, you're not going to have the budget sitting out there at the end of this year like you did this year in the same way. And so you won't have that hanging out there. But at least for a period of time, you're going to have these remote meetings, and you have a lot of things going on. You have a staff that is largely at capacity, and you have the pressures of the public and developers and whatnot coming knocking on your door. And so one of the discussions that I was hoping to have and that we can kind of start to think about is, what are those things that we did in 2020 that we can either learn from or continue to implement in 2021 to find those successes. And so that was the kind of the first thing that I wanted to dive into. If anybody has, burning things that are popping up now, please feel free, but I will kind of continue. So that was the first thing. The second thing that I think has touched on a lot of the scenarios that arose in 2020 while I was around. Obviously, I'm still just a short timer, although Councilmember Schaefer, thanks for joining because you're more of a short timer than me, is the no surprise rule. And I wanted to have a discussion on what this meant to everybody. What does this concept of the no surprise rule mean to you? How should it be implemented both from a council perspective and an administrative perspective? And what are some of the challenges that we've had in using that concept? And so starting with more definition of the concept across the board from the group, I was hoping to get input on what that truly means, because to be quite fair, I think it means different things to different people. And I think expectation setting is important there, because there are big things that are going to come through the city, and when those things should be brought up, how they should be brought up, and then what next steps are taken with them is largely related to the no surprise rule on the grand scale, if you will. And so that was one thing, how can this be an effective tool? Making sure though that we start kind of at a baseline where everybody understands the concept the same. And there's a few things, a few tools that the city can use to daylight topics and get information and have that flow of information so that there is no surprise down the line. The committees is a great tool to make sure that the appropriate groups of people, a group of 3, starts to get information, even really just a passing comment early on, and then those things build throughout time to make sure that those people on those committees get that information. Then when it comes to council, there is an invested small group of council that can provide the insight on that growing set of knowledge on that topic. The other thing too is the extended agenda, making sure that things get on an agenda so that people, and the extended agenda, not for a council meeting, to make sure that people at least see the topics a long ways out, whether that's, 2 months or 6 months. Those can always be moved. It's just a tool to make sure that everybody's kind of in the same mindset on how things are going to flow. And then of course you'd have the opportunity to then reach out and say, hey, I saw something pop up on the extended agenda, and maybe, who knows, maybe new things to the agenda are highlighted in yellow because they might be spread out throughout the next few months. And that would give an opportunity for everybody, not just those committee members that might have heard about it, the opportunity to understand what's coming down the line and to ask questions. And so, again, no surprise rule, making sure we're all on the same page and what that means, whether that's merely that something doesn't show up at a council meeting without having been brought up before, or does that mean that concepts as a whole need to be brought up X number of weeks or months in advance so that the evolution of it is incorporated into council's process? I think there's 2 ways to look at that. So kind of a big picture topic. And then any questions on that? I'm certainly not here to just strictly give a lecture. So anybody have any thoughts on the kind of the concept of the no surprise rule, tools to make that work most efficiently for everyone? Councilmember Naplan?
I love the idea of the extended agenda. I've seen a lot of other cities do it, and obviously you aren't setting anything in stone, but at least to have, always this continuous, looking ahead of these are the things you're likely going to see in future meetings, and kind of pencil them in for what meeting you might be seeing them at. And I think that happens behind the scenes, but for some reason, I always feel a little bit unsure what's coming up. And every once in a while, something shows up on an agenda that's kind of a big deal. And I'm thinking, oh, whoa, what is this? And so anyway, love the idea of the extended agenda.
Great. And as you noted, I mean, it takes flexibility on everybody's part to have an extended agenda because it'll change all the time. I've never seen one that just everything just moves down the list. And so having, appropriate expectations on how that should work, and you're not going to have a lot of information with it, but it'll be, code changes or projects or something like that. And so that's a tool that the city could consider. Any other comments? Councilmember Lingle. You're on mute though.
First on what I feel like I've learned from 2020, because that was sort of your first point. I think this all goes into surprise rule. One of the things that has been difficult for me, because I'm because of the way I look at packets, is that if there's things that are missing in packets, for me, it immediately gets me to stop, right? Because I like everything to be there. And in that same vein, I think that we could probably, on agenda bills and projects too, I've talked about this, I think we can simplify how reporting comes to us so that we can move things forward more carefully, but still quicker. And for me, I'll give it, on contracts, we already knew at Finance and Administration, we had an issue with needing to extend on-call contracts. It was brought up in a council meeting. So everybody knew that. There was some missing information. If that missing information had been there, I would have been supportive, because it was still the second look. I would have been really supportive of getting it on a consent agenda. But because I didn't see it, I felt like I had to see it again. You see what I'm saying? So I feel like one of the things we could learn as a group is that there might be simpler ways. When I've worked with councils in government and out, councils like structure, they like brevity, they like bullet points. So you really can, a lot of narrative actually can confuse things more than help. So that's one of the things that I feel like I've learned. Like I have to read things a lot more carefully, and I have to go back a lot more to make sure all that narrative is missing. Is meshing. I'm sorry, not missing. So I see that there could be a path to more things on the consent agenda. It just has to do with how we're prepared in advance, and that goes to the no surprise rule. A big issue for me on the no surprise rule, which ties to 2020, but also where we are now, is the wastewater treatment study. I think we really needed more information about what was coming our way in 2020. I was really taken aback that was not a more robust piece of information as we went through the 21-22 budget. I mean, those are big financing issues. I'm not saying that the report wouldn't happen, but I don't really recall enough of that information coming forward for awareness in 2020. All of this said, we have limited staff, and I've been, I think, consistently more supportive of additional staff. And this all flows into my whole thing about financial management and how do we get what we need. But big things like that really need to be, council really needs to be brought along more on that. And now that we're going to have a public works committee, I'm hoping that is the new way to have less surprises. But I would like us to see a real a real shared understanding that when decisions are made administratively, you can move things around on a line item basis, but it's a lot better to let council know what you're doing somehow. We didn't have a finance director in 2019, so that's fair, but we really need that advanced thing, because otherwise you lose track of oversight super fast. And this is a council that is cautious. And I think growth pressures, limited general fund, and big capital improvement needs, I think that's fair. So hopefully I've divided that in a way that's logical with a couple of concrete examples. I would really like to see us do more things on the consent agenda, but for me, that means packets are very concise. It means that all the information is there to make a decision at that next touch. And so you could see things not need that third look. You could see things not need even a second look potentially. We just got to get that rhythm going.
I think that's a great point there. You guys certainly use your consent agenda much more sparingly than a lot of other cities that I see. And so I think finding a routine and a flow of these agenda items that, you know, not all of them will be appropriate for that, but some of them will, whether that's a second or a third touch on consent. And so I think that's good. And frankly, you touched on a couple of things that I was going to bring up next. And the next kind of category was just kind of the coordinated and thoughtful, you know, flow of communications. And as Councilmember Naplin said, we've got the city to the public and we've got the public to the city. But what I'm speaking of is within the city. And so it's kind of the third one that's different than we were talking about before, but largely how, and again, this touches, you know, weaves in with all these other discussions, but how can council members get the information that they need in advance of a decision or for a decision in a thoughtful way? Again, you know, we've got directors that are very busy. And so the time spent on questions throughout the weeks is a real consideration, and trying to find ways to make sure that that information is being provided in a thoughtful and useful way to council members, but also allowing them to be successful in their, you know, operational capacity as well. And so a number of the things, and I know the mayor just sent out a meeting invite for her time to make sure that she was available to schedule time with you, and trying to, again, use that same type of thing to focus down. So, and again, I'm not putting direct proposals out there at all. It all has to get thought through, but having a time specific for directors where they can focus on those questions. There can also be, you know, a council question portal that questions get inputted into the system, and the appropriate directors will respond to those. That has a lot of, you know, unique benefits in that everybody understands what the questions are and what the answers are, rather than certain individuals getting more or less information in advance of a decision. It also allows those directors to address those questions at a specific time. They can see everything that's there. And then timing on questions, making sure that questions aren't coming in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the day of a council meeting. And so a lot of different tools. And again, these are things that council members can do, things that directors and administration can do to try to make sure that the directors are able to do all the work that they need to do, but also provide you all the information that you need. I think that's really important. And then, of course, and a lot of this has already come up, but on the other side, what can directors do to support you? And so, you know, having complete agenda bills that are giving the appropriate information, appropriate scope, appropriate supporting documents. We've talked about in the past the full project accounting to make sure that you're not asked to approve, you know, the small thing when it locks you in for the long term on something. All of those considerations are important. And then, you know, just confirming the process is understood and followed, and acknowledging the process that led to the decision point. So rather than just saying approve this, say, you know, here's how we got there. And I think that's come up with RFP process or negotiation process, just to give context to it. And again, I definitely appreciate Councilmember Langle's comment that too much information can not be useful. I'm certainly mindful of that when I work with my clients. I don't want to just flood legal stuff all over the place, because that's not useful. And so there is a sweet spot for information to make sure that you get all of that information, the full project accounting, the process that got there, the supporting materials, but it's done in a way that, you know, is useful to council. So again, I think everybody has things to think about and ways to do that. But, I have a weekly check-in with Laura each week to kind of check in on matters of the city. And, sometimes it can be hard to have that call because Laura's real busy, and we need to support her to be able to do and to run her department and to do all the work that she has on her plate as a working director. And so sometimes I feel bad, going over, the bigger picture stuff because she just has so little time to do that. And so I think finding ways to streamline this thoughtful communication to and from council is going to help facilitate people like Laura to be successful in their role, as well as council being successful, because everyone will agree council having the information to make the decisions is essential. I mean, there's no way around that. But it's also essential to make sure that the directors are able to continue to kind of work through all the other work. So then pivoting away from council, away from the directors to everybody, I think that there's a few things that, I've noticed that we can all work on. I think tone is one, as we, write emails, as we make comments in council meetings, as we have phone calls. I think tone really matters. I think it matters to the public first and foremost. I think they see it and they can feel it. But then, of course, obviously, we're all just people working together, and how that tone is expressed in those different forms of communication, I think, is going to dictate how successful this group is going to be. And then number two, I think acknowledging and appreciating the hard work that everybody's doing on behalf of the city. I think that's really important. It goes with the next one, celebrating the wins. Everybody here and all of the directors and the staff at the city, everybody worked really hard last year, and it's the same every year, but acknowledging that hard work and acknowledging that when something comes to you, absolutely, there might be something more that you would have wanted, but I can guarantee you a lot of work went into what you did get. And so, acknowledging the hard work of everybody. And that includes council. I mean, you've got a lot of materials to read that's coming at you with only a few days to prepare for council meetings. And it takes a lot. And you have a lot of people that are looking to you to make policy decisions for the best interests of the community. That's a big weight on your shoulders. And so I think everybody has a lot that they're doing and trying to accomplish. And I think that's a great thing to keep in mind. And Councilmember Lingle said it earlier today, and I added it to my list because I thought it was great. And it was collaborating around our roles, and not having roles fighting each other, but having a collaboration around those roles. It is essential for a successful city council. The city needs a successful city council, needs a successful mayor and administration. And the city is going to be even more successful when they're working well together. And so I think all of these different things that we're thinking about, talking about a little bit today, and we'll talk about more, is going to lead to that collaboration around our roles. So I thought that was a great concept that I wanted to drop in there. So my hope had been that we would have deeper conversations on each of those. And Councilmember Langer, you just raised your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing is that, and maybe this gets to the heart of just how I feel, and I've said this to other staff, particularly Laura, I've tried to say it to others, is, council's not the enemy. And the way things are, we have really no profile out there in the public to demonstrate how we work with the mayor. I mean, people in the community don't even know we have council committees, and so, those are examples of where we can that we do work together. And yes, we have debates and things administration wants and we don't want. That's all true. But I don't think the public even understands that. And if this goes to tone, the tone will matter and be more consistent if some of that is better shared with the community. And I've thrown out some ideas about that. Some others have come up today. But I'm not the enemy of employees. And so if I don't vote for something the administration wants, it's not because I don't value employees. It's because I have to make a tough decision around money, usually. And I just want to say that. I mean, just because I don't agree with an employee or what they want. Doesn't mean I don't value them. It doesn't mean I don't think they work hard. I just have a different job, and it can really kind of be crappy.
So
you know, you have to say no to something that somebody wants.
I think that's a fantastic point. I mean, we all work in local government in small towns. It can be really hard, and I think we've had situations where you're reviewing and approving an employee contract, or you're facilitating the success or perhaps challenges of a particular department, and everybody, and I think, like you said, as the tone, the thoughtfulness of the discussions and the collaboration will show what you just said, is that this is about finding out what's best and working together for that bigger goal of a successful city of Duval. It's not anything personal. And I think the more and more we collaborate around our roles, the more and more we are respectful in our tone and in our discussions, those things don't get personal, and I constantly have conversations with my clients where they don't agree or they're not happy. And that's kind of the nature of what I do. But hopefully the discussions are done in a way that I don't get offended, and other people, don't as well when we have differences of opinion. And I think that's just, we all have that. It's a level of maturity in what we do, right? And I think it's how it's operating. So I think that's a great comment. So I think the intention I think is to generally wrap up. As I said to start, and I do hope, is that you all have continued conversations about how to fine tune these things. Councilmember Lengyel, you brought up, communicating what committees are doing. I've got a client that at the end of their agenda, they have individual council members, one from each committee, report what happened at the last committee meeting. It takes, 2-3 minutes for each one, nothing overly detailed, but it's a way to let the whole council know kind of what came up, and then also for the public. And so there's a lot of these tools that can absolutely be used with very minimal change and very minimal impact to people to start to beef up some of these things, some of these desires. And so, continue to think about those, continue to think about, successes and things that we learned in 2020 that we can pull through into 2021. Feel free to share those with the group. You can email me and I can work those in to a future discussion. And should you, invite me, I'm more than happy to come back. Obviously I'm around all the time, but come back for another discussion at a COW meeting or a separate training session to just continue these conversations. Because in my view, this is really good use of your time. You've got a great group of people now, full council with Councilmember Schaefer joined up to really, hit the ground running here in 2021 and have a successful year. I'm super optimistic about it. I wish we could be around in person more, and I'm looking forward to when that happens.
Daniel, thank you for taking time with us today. I know we extended past when we originally mentioned we would have you here. We find your training and your experience and wise advice very helpful. And I appreciate the encouragement you give us in collaborating, watching our tone, and celebrating. I think we forget. I look back on last year and all the things that were accomplished by the mayor, our staff, and council, I think, should smile and take some credit too. We're advancing some incredible things for our city. And at the end of the day, that's why we're all here, is to help our city be a better place. And I'm hopeful that as we get questions, we can come back and talk about this more. I don't think it's a one-time discussion, everything's perfect, but finding ways where we can agree and collaborate, I think, will be key. Well, Daniel, thank you. We've got one more topic. You certainly need to stay for that. Thank you for your generosity and your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate working with you all. So have a nice weekend. I'll see you all soon.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you. Well, Council, been a long meeting. The last item we had was committees. Most of us, we do have Rick with us now. And so I wanted to take a moment just to review our committees. The one area we had an opening was public safety. Rick said he'd be thrilled to be a part of that. So that was the direction we were heading. Currently, land use is Councilmember Langle, Hoag, and Naplin. Public Works is McHenry, Brudnicki, and myself. Public Safety is Brudnicki, McHenry, and Councilmember Schaefer. Finance Administration is Lingle, Napland, and myself. And then we have Economic Development, which is currently inactive. I had talked to Diane briefly about opportunity to have Rick with his background on public works. And I don't think we got a chance to wrap that up. So Diane, I hate to put you on the spot. As a senior council member, you're welcome to stay on that. If you're open to having Rick be a part of that, I think Rick said he was more than open for that as well. So what are your thoughts, Diane? I've got you on mute.
I would be fine to get off the committee and have Councilmember Schaefer take over my position on the committee.
And that's on Public Works?
On Public Works, yeah.
And Rick, you're open to that? So we would have you on two committees. One would be Public Safety and one would be Public Works.
Yeah, both are very interesting to me. And I'm, happy, very happy to be involved in both committees. Public safety is obviously near and dear to my heart for probably obvious reasons. I think we have a great department, and I look forward to working with them. As far as public works, with an engineering background. A lot of this stuff is probably more interesting to me than others. Water, sewer, that type of stuff really does hold a lot of interest to me. So, like I said, I think it's a good fit in both cases.
Great. Well, that really rounds out those committees. Mayor?
I mentioned it earlier, and I forgot this was on the agenda. So are there 2 or 3 people that are willing to meet once a week on Fridays to go over the legislative stuff?
So we do have ad hoc committees, and this would be one that would help support the mayor. So it looks like we have a couple of hands up right now. Okay. Jennifer Naplin and Dorothy Langle.
Great.
Is there anyone else? And Mayor, I'll check my schedule as well. Mayor had talked with me about opportunities. We haven't had somebody in-house that, a couple of key things is being able to advocate for you on these big ticket items like transportation. And nearly every elected official that's come to talk to us from our region says, talk to us, come meet with us, because it really makes a difference.
It can't just be me.
And so we may have some opportunities. The mayor and I are going to meet Monday with a group to talk about that. And so we'll get you some information to hear more about it. But just legislative things are important. And you'd be amazed at, times I've gone back to Washington, D.C. to talk to folks, and then you hear them, during the next week in a talking about things that you talked to them about, and they remember those. And where we can advance those things for us as a community are huge. And there's a lot of folks in our community that have a lot of sway. I was talking to someone that personally with the Gates Foundation, and, they get politically active now and then. And, there's folks in our community that just says, tell us what we can do for you. They're in those meetings and they have sway. And so anyway, I think our point here is mayor's ready to get moving on some of that and try to have more influence, especially on some of these items like transportation, where we just feel frustrated. And we're very fortunate to have Councilmember Naplin dive in and working on some It's a very important committee on transportation. So I think I saw a couple of hands there. Who would like to talk to this?
Yeah, I will. I'll just go ahead and try and set up a Zoom for next Friday.
Councilmember McHenry.
Just really quick, I wanted to say that I'm interested, but I don't have capacity right now to meet regularly. So my hope was that, could I assume that this group would maybe send out regular communication? And if something comes up that piques the interest of multiple council members, that we could also potentially get involved with a single item versus the ongoing effort?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started with Diana Hart here, who was giving the legislative reports every council meeting, and then
Mayor, I think your screen froze there for a minute. We'll see if it comes back. We lost you for. So Jody, while we're waiting for the mayor's computer to come back on, would you make sure that Rick gets a copy of that committee report or the committee assignments?
After council has a chance to finish their conversation, I have a couple of follow-up questions and clarifications so I can finish this document.
Okay, great. I think Rick will enjoy seeing that. And not only do we have our own committees, Rick, but many of our council members are on regional committees as well. And I think you'll enjoy seeing that.
Yes.
Great. Mayor, it looks like you're back, Mayor.
Oh, I don't know.
For a little bit.
I froze, so I don't know where I cut off.
Um,
And if you know what, I'll just let it go. I'll
Okay.
call you, Amy.
Councilmember Naplet.
I just wanted to say that if we have this committee, my intent isn't, I don't want it to be like where, the 2 or 3 of us kind of decide how we think the city should feel about things. It's more like, what are you hearing? What do you think we might want to, come back to council and say, hey, do you think we should comment on this? Because for me, like being on the transportation, some of these transportation boards, I want to know that I have support from council with some of the things that I'm saying. And so, just having a collaborative process to where, as a smaller ad hoc committee, maybe we could say, I'm hearing this. Okay, well, let's try to put something together to make sure we find out what council feels as a whole. And I think that's what Diana tried to do is, she tried to put stuff together and then brought it to council where we could have the conversation. So that's how I would want to participate. And I just want to set that expectation ahead of time. I don't want to.
Absolutely. But we do have some pretty clear-cut things on our legislative agenda. So, there's going to be things that come to us that are no-brainers. And, I think that we'll get to know Rick pretty well, but on some issues, it's just so clear-cut where we know where people stand that we can, get moving on that process sooner. And so, but no, you don't make decisions for the whole city, but if we know where the city's at, then we can start the process of providing whatever comment we need to.
I'd still really like if we make formal comment on something that the whole council could get a brief of an email we might plan to send or, to allow input. I just want to bring that up. You're intentional along, but I just want to say it
It's
out.
good clarification.
Jody, Dot, you had your hand up?
I don't want to lose track of some things staff reported to us because in particular around communications and public involvement. And several people reported that they had done internal work that they felt had some real legs. And some of it could impact this legislative stuff. Some of it could impact all these projects we've got going on. And council chats. I mean, it gets sprinkled around for right now. It seems because we got so much going on, but I would really like to see what work the council, the staff have done just to familiarize myself. Because if there's stuff to build there or, give council input to as individuals or whatever, let's not lose sight of that because we're going to need that advocacy. We're going to need that political support from our residents on stuff. So I'd like to see that stuff. And then in that context is Jody's need around what the heck to do with this website, because I've tried to navigate it many times and it does need probably a little more than a refresh. But she said there was a consultant that had done some communication stuff. And if there's anything concrete on that, I'd love to see whatever that produced. Because if there's ideas to build off of, I would like to know what they are. So maybe that could get integrated into other work we do.
So Mayor, is that possible that we could bring in folks from police and maybe Sean and yourself just to talk about that?
Mhm.
Those are internal to administration.
Yeah,
We don't often see, but that might be a good place to cow for us to have a good, maybe a presentation followed by a good discussion with council to see, one, just to educate us on what's happening with communication, and two, to be able to receive input and maybe develop a more comprehensive communication plan.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it sounds like there might be some openness to looking into bringing at least a consultant in to help, which would be fantastic, honestly. I didn't put it in the budget because we didn't have the data to put that together yet. But I don't know. We'll have to see if staff can track down the documents from the previous consultant, because that was before my time in the mayor's office. And there's probably some backstory too. I can't remember the backstory and why that person didn't continue. But yeah, we can absolutely do that.
And just to jump in, our future police chief, DeBach, he brought up about how, what outreach stuff they have in place. I don't know if everybody knows. I mean, I'm just familiar with Neighborhood Night Out, so that's
Yeah,
but he said he's got some research they've done on social equity.
mhm.
I mean, it sounds like there's some meat out there that even if there's not presentations, I would love to just read.
Yeah, I know he just finished that within the last month. And when Chief Hurt and Lieutenant Sabrin went through it, they've shared their work with at least the Public Safety Committee. So I think it would probably be good for council to take a look at those. They did some excellent work. They're not just cops, they're policy people too. And they do a really good job with it.
I loved hearing they walk from business to business downtown and
Mhm.
meet the business owners and, hey, what do you need from us? And what are your concerns? That kind of stuff's just a real pleasure to hear. That community policing is, I think, an important part of what we do here in Duval. Jody, you said you had some questions to help square away some things with committees.
Yeah, so it's possible that somebody has sent me an email about some of these items, and I apologize. My email's been just blowing up lately, as I'm sure the rest of yours has as well. So if I lost something and you already told me, I apologize. I'm looking for who the chairs are for the various committees. And then I wanted to talk briefly about some of the ad hoc stuff. So who is the chair of the land use committee?
We haven't.
I'm actually looking at my other screen, so somebody just say a name.
They have not elected a chair, but we'll do that at our next meeting.
Perfect. And Public Works?
That's Councilmember McHenry.
And Public Safety?
Diane Brudnicki.
FAC?
I don't think,
We haven't picked one.
Okay, thank you.
Last time it was Councilmember Hope.
so at your next meeting, let's get those elected.
And then, so we have some ad hocs that I still have listed. I don't know if, because we don't ever really officially disband an ad hoc committee, really. We just kind of like, oh, their work is done, so we don't need it anymore. So I just wanted to follow up. So maybe 2 years ago, we created a city facilities ad hoc committee with McHenry and Iyer. And it's still on my list, and I don't know what council's appetite is to keep that or not at this point in time. And then we have our council ethics policy ad hoc committee, which currently has Ms. Hogue and Ms. McHenry. And then the Human Services Grant Committee, which has McHenry and Hoag. And you guys just created the legislative session ad hoc with, I think I heard Langle and Naplin, except I wrote Jennifer Langle and Dorothy Langle. So let me. So going back to what the first one I mentioned, the city facilities, is that something that council is even interested in keeping active, or should I go ahead and inactivate that one officially?
My understanding of that one at the time, it was sort of a temporary thing while we were getting more, it was more of a liaison to find what kind of information does council need or want to, and now that we're going down this other path, to me, it seems a little bit obsolete at this point, because I'm sure all of council wants to stay in the loop with this item.
Okay.
But that's just me.
I will delete it unless somebody speaks up.
I think since we're going out with a facility plan and all council members want to be on board, I think that'd be wise.
Just of note, Steve got that RFP on the street today.
And the council ethics policy does only have 2 people right now, which is totally fine. But I figured, you guys could open it up if there's a third that wanted to join in the fun.
The rest of us don't have ethics, so.
I think, I don't know how everyone else feels, and I'm not speaking for Councilmember Hoag. This is just my view, is that we're so close to just bringing it to the whole council that I don't even know, besides if we do meet with the attorney once, that there's much more after that than that. So I don't know. It's up to everyone else.
Are we ready to send that? By the way, it's kind of a side. Are we ready to send that to Daniel just for review to get his input before we bring it back to council? So Mayor, do you have any concern with our doing that if we just email that to Daniel?
Not at all.
Okay. Councilmember Naplin.
I really like the idea of maybe Councilmember McHenry and Hoag also meeting with the attorney just a little bit, because I think there were some kind of issues and concerns that council had brought up before, and maybe they could share those and prep Daniel on kind of, where some of the sticking points were or questions we might have ahead of time, so that when the presentation to council occurs, some of that legwork has been done.
And it just dawned on me, Mr. Schaefer hasn't seen the ethics policy at all. So maybe share it with him as well, just so that he at least has a chance to look at it before you guys bring it back to the whole group, because the rest of you have had a chance to kind of see it and digest it a few times. Oh, Langley, Dorothy, not either? Okay.
I don't know, Mike, have you seen it?
I have a copy, in fact.
I can put, I think I have the latest draft, or one of Ms. Hoag or McHenry can send it, and I can throw it in your guys' OneDrive so that you guys have it.
Great.
If you'd like me to.
Councilmember Hoag, did you want to confirm, if Jody's able to do that, that you could confirm it's the one that you were going to send to the attorney, and then that way everyone can look at it? Yeah,
I'm happy to send it to you, Jody.
Perfect. Yeah, just so I know I'm putting the absolute most current one in there.
And then Jody, if you forward that to Rick, that was a great idea. So Rick can take a look and provide some feedback as well.
Yeah. Oh, I need to make a note. I don't think I've shared my link, my OneDrive link with Mr. Schaefer. So
Okay.
I will do that. And then the Human Services Grant Committee, Ms. Hoag just recently volunteered to help Ms. McHenry kind of pick that one back up. And I didn't know if any other council members would be interested, or if it makes more sense just to have a smaller group work on it.
What do you think, Councilmember McHenry?
I'm good either way, whatever. I mean, if I recall, what's our timeline for that, Jody? Were you thinking, I feel like we were gonna start looking at the process, the scoring, try to tweak it before when the next round would be?
Yeah. Well, technically, the reason why we did this time last year was because the current policy says that we're going to get the applications out like now, and with a deadline of like mid-February or something. So obviously that's not going to happen. So, I mean, the faster we can get going on it, because I'm sure you guys would like to allocate additional funding and stuff. So the faster we can get through that. And yes, we're going to be looking at like the application process, the matrix, that kind of stuff.
And don't forget, we had a draft updated policy that came forth to council a year or two ago. So you have stuff to look at to compare the existing with the potential changes.
I know I could find that probably in my email, but is it also in the OneDrive, Jody, under like a human resource? I feel like there's a file in there that's.
There might be. I can add it. So I'm making myself a note of all the OneDrive stuff I'm going to do. Ethics policy.
Just make sure that all the up-to-date stuff, I guess, is in there, and we can go from there.
Policy. So I have to get your guys' packet out today. So just so you know, none of this is actually going to happen today. So, but yeah, I can put the current human services policy and the one that was presented to council last year in a human services policy folder. I'll create another folder and stuff. So I think that was it for me. We used to do local liaisons and representation, similar to what you guys were talking about during your goals and work plan, was some sort of liaisons for the various organizations. So we had one for Chamber, Rotary, the school district, the Historical Society. So just something to kind of maybe think about as a future discussion item is if you guys want to have specifically assigned people to those types of things, or just kind of a round robin representation, if you will. That was it, I think, for what I just wanted to clarify for my current document. And then if and when we ever create a council procedures ad hoc committee, if that's the route you guys decide to go, I'll just add that to the list.
Jody, the only one that wasn't mentioned was the Sound Cities Public Issues Committee meetings that I attend. And I think this year I never was formally like appointed to be that. And
oh,
Nathan is the backup to that. So I don't know.
Yeah, actually, I think, thank you for bringing that up, Michelle. It slipped my mind. We should just put under mayor's report for next week's selection of the SEA reps. So it's formalized. We'll just take a quick motion or a consensus.
Okay, I will add that to the agenda right now. Say it. SCA representatives, is that what you wanted it?
Public Issues Committee.
Okay. Perfect. Got it. Oh, that's all I had, so.
Councilmember McHenry.
I'm hoping my dog doesn't start barking here again. So did we come to a, on the public outreach and communication, maybe that being an ad hoc committee, is that something that everyone was ready to start sooner rather than later? Or were we leaving it at, we wanted to kind of start accumulating information that's been worked on and let everyone look at it and then decide?
I don't know that we decided on the first question. We were going to have probably the PD with some of their background information, maybe our PIO come and with the mayor and just tell us what administration's been working on as kind of a background educational piece. And then I think we could certainly decide whether to have an ad hoc committee to start working on that so that we can improve our communications where we can. We have some limitations, but I think we're doing some really good work in that area. But I think we all realize that, we really want to be getting more information from our citizens where we can. I would hope with high-tech stuff nowadays that we could find a way to streamline that and get a lot more, but it's always a challenge. Councilmember McHenry?
Just wanted to follow up with that because I really see, there's a few different sections in that whole category. And for me, the outreach, not only to the community to get their input, but also to communicate with them. So that includes the council chats that we've done. That includes possibly putting something in a newsletter and other kinds of communication. I think that is work that we need to do. And I think we could start that at any time, really. And before we get into anything else, is just try and accumulate those ideas of what does council want to communicate to the community, and then also what do we want to hear from them, or how do we get input from them. So those are two things that I think council would really need to do their work on, in addition to then these other things that are going to happen, which is finding out what everyone else has been working on in regards to communication.
Are there members that would like to be on a communication ad hoc committee if we start one? Councilmember McHenry, Rick's interested, Councilmember Langle.
And Jody, if you could send out to council the council social media policy, that would be great.
Yeah, if you still have your onboarding binder, it should be in there for most of you as an exhibit to your council procedures.
It is. I just went through that, Jody.
And
Yeah, you're the newest one though. I know it's in yours. It's the rest of them, I'm not sure.
And of note too, back when I was on council, I had drafted a policy for a social media ombudsman.
Yeah.
To be a person in charge of, like, in the city council Facebook page, like going out and gathering the questions and communicating and being in charge. And the city of Redmond, they actually have somebody that they assign a council member every month to do it. And it just rotates. And so if you guys want to look at that, if I remember correctly, the policy was completely done. It's just council didn't act on it at the time. This is before you guys were around.
Do we want to call it, is there a certain name? We've talked about public outreach. We've talked about communications. Is there a name for that committee or that ad hoc committee? Councilmember Langle.
One I've heard used other places, I don't have a preference, is either public engagement, citizen engagement. It could have citizen engagement and communications. And, as far as my participation, I don't need to necessarily be on this, but one thought is, I know the legislative session will end, and I'm only interested in money out of the legislature. So, or not only, but that's my focus always. So, once that legislative session ends, then I'll have more time. I could work on anything, even whether I'm on a committee or not. I mean, that's just always been part of what I had to do professionally. So I have strong feelings that it get done.
So Jody, if you'll put together, maybe in place of our city facilities, if we have a citizen engagement outreach, and we can take a look
at. Call it citizen, or do we want to call it community?
I wouldn't use the word
community.
citizen.
Yeah.
Right. I think
No.
community outreach
Yeah, I think.
And engagement.
and engagement. Thank you.
I think
Sorry, Councilmember Schaefer, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, I didn't raise my hand, so you didn't interrupt. I think there is two major aspects of that, the citizens of Duval and also the businesses of Duval. And I think the outreach is going to be a little bit different in both of those cases. And my personal interest right now, at least, is the small business community we have here in Duval. So I'd certainly like the opportunity to talk to them and get their views on things.
So I saw Mr. Schaefer and Ms. McHenry raise their hands. I saw a third one. Was that Ms. Langle? But she kind of won't be fully involved until after the legislative stuff is done.
I'm kind of forewarning you that I have opinions, but really at the end of the day, public engagement, whatever word you want, needs to cut across all committees. We need to have, that should be the end, that we all know what our job is to fulfill that policy or recommendation or framework, whatever Councilmember McHenry and others, come up with. Maybe my comments are more like techniques I've seen be successful and those that haven't been.
Do you want to be on that?
Whatever somebody wants me to do after the mayor gets whatever she needs out of me. How's that?
Okay. So how about we start with Rick and with Amy on that ad hoc committee to begin with, and then we can add others. I think all council wants to be involved at some point and keeping up on it. So Rick, one reason, and Mayor, thank you for reminding me that we were trying to get away from the term citizen. One is some folks in town aren't citizens, and that we want to include all the folks in our community. The other point is, as you said, it's not just citizens, it's businesses, and the community helps involve all that. And so we've been trying to migrate to that term where it's appropriate.
Good.
Councilmember McHenry, and then Director Thomas.
Sorry, I think this is about it, then I'll be done. But I think the public, whatever we just called it, community outreach, engagement, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. I think that it's definitely something we could rotate some people in and out of, throughout the course of a year, just depending on, we can all maybe contribute something to it. But one other item I wanted to bring up that Jody had mentioned was the procedures. And I've been really interested in that for a while, but my thought was maybe, I'm just throwing this out here, Councilmember Hogue, when the ethics policy is done, which I do think will happen this year, that there would be space to then maybe start looking at procedures for whoever wanted to do. I know we've all taken on quite a bit here. So unless there's people who have extra time now that want to start taking a stab at it. But that was just my thought, is once we accomplish some of the things we have on our plate, that we would have room then to maybe start working on procedures. But I know that's not on our priority list, but I just wanted to put that out there.
That's a good, I have a suggestion now. It's not there's always gonna be things that come up that are council related and in council's purview that need to work on. Maybe you just have a standing ad hoc council operations committee and call it that, so that you can work on all sorts of stuff.
Are you saying like convert the ethics?
Yeah, just call it a council operations committee.
That would cover a few things.
Yeah, the only thing we want to be sure of is that we don't end up with any duplication with finance and administration, although administration really is not operations per se, it's more structure.
Yeah.
I think.
But I think it would be, like you guys are working on ethics and council procedures, and that's council specific. So if it's council operations, I think you can keep it in that silo if you want. It was just a thought.
And there is some distinction between an ad hoc committee and a standing committee too. So I think it would just be things that every now and again come up that need to be addressed.
Well, we have plenty to work on in the financial area anyway.
So do you want me to change the title then? Oh, Ms. Hogue.
Administration, it's in the code.
The only question, I had a question about a different committee. So if you want to ask your question.
We'll wrap up real quick here. Laura, you had your hand up as well. Did you have input on the topic?
I'm kind of going where Michelle Hogue is going, which is just committees in general, watching what the structures of those committees are so that we stay within OPMA requirements. Jody and I were talking about this. We're actually going to touch base with Daniel. I do really need us to look at our council procedures when it comes to these standing committees, because right now there's not a lot of meat in them. And we did have an issue come up at one of our committee members where we couldn't let somebody from the public speak. And it was hard to explain that to them, because once we do that, then it opens up our committees to OPMA, recording, having to put them out on the web. It's a lot more work. Not that it can't be done, but I don't think that's the purpose of it. And then if we went towards OPMA, then council members would be prevented from talking, like you'd have that grouping issue. So I think we need to resolve that issue, because I think land use committee is one where when you're talking about a project, a policy, a request, people are going to want to engage. And I just want to make sure that we can clearly communicate what the parameters of that committee are. And then
I was just going to say, I don't want to get into the details of what you ran into on land use, other than saying that somebody that, wanted to be there and listen decided to have input. And it got a little bit challenging to try to shut them off and say, this isn't what this is about. I hope that turns into an anomaly, but it does point out with our council committee procedures that we can tighten some things up, have some language, hopefully with Daniel's help, so that it's really clear. Mayor does a nice job at our meetings directing public when they're speaking that they've got time limits and when necessary, stepping in to cut them off. The idea is we want to be engaged with our citizens, but on our committees, that's not what it's designed for.
Yeah, I mean, it was fine. It's just that was an issue way back when we had land use committees, a decade ago, and that was a challenge then. So I see it as a continued challenge, especially for a committee that's super active. And then the last thing, because I haven't heard it yet, but we're talking about committees. We have this park board / ad hoc committee or whatever we're doing. Would you like me to come back to a cow with a kind of, I'll call it a baby report and discussion about the board and things that we'd have to do in the code to make a go of that, because it's so old. And then maybe going at least in this first year or this biennium with ad hoc parks advisory committee that we could decide, that maybe has planning commission, council, members of the public, and interested groups.
Yeah, Laura, I think we do need some education on it, because a board advisory group, they have different roles and different, usually that's providing advice to the mayor. But I think we could use some education before we decide to move forward on one of those.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
the council agree, have Laura come back to a cow so we can have a good discussion on it? See a lot of heads nodding. So Amy, coming back to you, we were talking about what to do with our ethics. Do we change that? I like the mayor's suggestion, but I would suggest right now that we just focus on getting that done. And then maybe when it's completed, we'll come back and talk about changing that to a council operations that might handle other things.
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing if everyone else.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great suggestion, but we'll come back, take a look at it. Other thoughts from council? Councilmember Hoag.
I have a thought, and so the public, I don't know what you ended up calling it, public outreach committee, communication committee. Can we consider having that committee have chamber meeting or chamber memberships? I know Councilmember McHenry, I hear already has one, but maybe the other people on the committee could. I'd like to know what the council thinks of that.
How many council members would like to see 1 or 2 memberships that we might rotate over the years? So at least a couple of members. It's a decision by their private group. Certainly the mayor is there now, but they feel pretty strongly that if folks are going to be a part of it, they need to have a membership. I'm not used to seeing that, but having said that, that's one of the options for us to have 1 or 2 memberships. We buy the membership. I think it's $150 a year. Is that right, Amy?
It's gone up a little bit. I feel like it's about 200 a year now.
A couple hundred. How many would like to do that? Councilmember Naplin. Yeah, have to unmute.
I think with correspondence we'd had with the chamber, there's a reduced rate for council because we would be sort of in the nonprofit grouping. So I think it might only be $100 or $150. The other thing I wanted to point out is, yes, I absolutely think that we should have like a council liaison, a couple people who get that membership per year. I don't necessarily think it has to be tied to who's on the communications kind of ad hoc committee of kind of coming up with a plan, because I think of that committee is kind of coming up with a plan, and part of that plan would be a recommendation that we should have a liaison to certain groups as part of the plan. That being said, I absolutely would support if it was Councilmember Hoag and Councilmember McHenry who happened to be on that ad hoc committee that want to be, that liaison. But I wouldn't say it would have to be tied to the members permanently of that subcommittee. That's all. But
Councilmember Bernicki.
Yeah, I was just wondering if a council member joins through the city as a member of the chamber, then we would be there representing the city, but not our business, correct?
Sounds like ethics policy.
Yes.
That
Well,
would be correct. So that if you're there, it's hard to mix those two because we realize a couple of you have businesses in town and may be part of that. But if you're one of those selected to be representing council, you wouldn't be able to, you'd have to make a clear distinction that you're not representing the business, obviously. Councilmember McHenry?
Yeah, that's a great point, Diane. And I was thinking about saying something similar. So for example, I do have a chamber membership for my small business. And when I do attend, it's not for the city. Now, you hear things. And so in that capacity, you can receive information. You're hearing things that, you can use in another category of your life. But my preference would be to not be one of the ones rotated with the city membership because I do have one for a business. And so therefore it's not go to the chamber representing council. It's just hard with those two hats. So just to make it very clear, those are just my initial thoughts with it. But I think it'd be great if maybe the public engagement, I'm sorry, I still don't have the name down. Maybe we can come up with a fun acronym for it. But for maybe that committee could be in charge, at least initially, about organizing a schedule. You've got Rotary or Chamber, all these different groups. So if we want council to represent, they could at least kind of come up with some sort of scheduling or have council members tell them, and they could show, okay, here's who's going to the chamber representing the city on this meeting date. So, and I will say lastly that some of the meetings do fall on council nights, so those would obviously not work, but.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't have a small business in Duval or any business in Duval, so certainly that might be a role I could fill. The chamber membership specifically is what I was thinking of, and be glad to report back to the council, topics of interest and any useful information from there.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Brunicki.
So I just had another question. I haven't joined chamber ever in over 10 years because of the conflict of my business, but I was wondering maybe would it be appropriate, like me as a business join the chamber, I have my membership as a business, and then the city buys the city council membership. So there's two memberships being paid for, even though I'm the one person, or whoever it is, the one person. And I guess, I don't know. Yeah, it's really hard because you have to think, if I'm going there, am I going there for my business or am I going there for the city?
Yeah.
Which is, it's a conundrum because wouldn't you want the business people to be there?
Yeah. I think at different times, every one of us are making decisions that you could say, well, gee, I've got some interest in it. Most of us have an interest because we live here in town. So there can be those conflicts. The difference is when you separate the work you're doing as a council member. I do appreciate Councilmember McHenry was just real clear. She said she sees a potential conflict and she just stays out of it. I like a verse in the Bible that says a wise person sees trouble coming and avoids it. That kind of falls in that category where you say, yeah, look, I'm trying to avoid the appearance of doing something wrong. And that's really what it's all about. It's perception. And so I think as much as we can avoid that, there sounds like there's general agreement. Mayor, I'd like to ask, you're on there, you're representing the city, if you will. We just like to have a good relationship with our chamber. Do you see any issues with us having a couple of memberships and just?
Not at all. When I was a council member, I paid for a membership out of my own pocket so I could participate. So yeah, I see absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Now, we do have a legislative budget, and Dana's not here. I always like to talk with Dana before I spend money on anything. But I think even though we've cut back a little bit because of COVID-19 and revenues, that we probably have the money to spend a couple, $300-400 to have at least 2 memberships. Do you see any issue with that money-wise, Mayor? I mean, it just is, like I say, I'll check with Dana, but it seems like we have the money available for us.
I'm looking at the budget right now.
You definitely have the money available, and we were really tight. We were all really tight on our conferences and training, et cetera, due to COVID. But if you guys need more money, we can, we can do a budget amendment. So I think you guys need to do what you need to do. Any trainings, conferences, meetings, and if you don't have enough budget, we'll come back and get you more.
Okay.
Because it's important to be at the table.
Thank you, Mayor.
You do
So-
have some
Go ahead, Laura.
money in your, sorry, you do have some money in your budget under kind of travel and training. So we can just flex it. You've got one big budget, so we can just watch it, but I don't think there's going to be an issue. I just looked.
So for hands from council members, those that would like to get 2 memberships, and then we can work on who's going to fill those. But who would like to move forward with that, having 2 memberships? It looks like we have agreement from council to start with 2 memberships. I don't know that we need to, Councilmember Naplin?
Super quick, just because I had correspondence with the chamber, is my understanding is when you have a membership, you can always invite a guest, I believe. So, there's some weird things with online meetings, but so even if you are not the person who gets that membership, if you really want to go to a meeting and we aren't going to exceed our 3 total, so we have a quorum, I think occasionally another member could tag along. Another council member. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there just to let people know. So I don't need a membership. There might be a meeting I'm like, hey, can I tag along?
I think that's a great idea. Well, how nice to have some representation. So Mayor, in terms of logistics, we don't have a checkbook as a council. Who would we work through to get us 2 memberships?
Jody or Dana, they can process it just like they do conferences and trainings. Or Sherry could do it as well.
Okay. Jody, I hate to put anything else on your plate, and I'm not allowed, but could you follow up for us, please, for the mayor and either with Dana or whoever is appropriate, and see if they'll contact and we may need to actually specify who it is and have a name so it's not a floating position. That's my understanding from the chamber. So who would be interested in one of those spots to begin with?
The membership.
Yes,
spot?
Rick, I think you mentioned you would be. So Rick could be one of those. Is there someone else that would like to go to those meetings?
I would like to, but I can't.
No, that's, well, you actually can, I can say it's,
I mean, not as a city representative.
all righty.
Yeah.
And there's clarification on that too. I just redid OPMA and PRA training this week. Is if you are not discussing city business, as many people that want to go can go. It's when you start discussing city business that it becomes a problem. There's the appearance issue, but I don't think, especially in these virtual meetings, I don't think there's going to be an issue with that. I think they'll just be thankful for the attendance.
So, Diane, I'm comfortable with that. Like you say, it's a matter of recognizing that you do have a business in town and that you'd be going as a council member. But I also understand, if you just say, I want to stay away from that completely. I mean, it really, I'm comfortable either way.
Well, what makes it hard is you go with the right intention, but then people start to talk to you and it's like, they don't care about my business.
Yeah.
They see you as the face of the city, no matter what you do. So that is why I couldn't go all these years.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll pay for it, because that's the other part is if you are a business and the city's paying for it, that doesn't look good either. That's a bad
No,
look.
I get it. So with that, Rick's interested. He said he could report back. Shall we start with 1 membership then? And we'll see how that goes. We'll get our feet wet. Councilmember Hoag?
Yeah, one thought, maybe we can do it kind of like I do the Sound Cities PIC meetings where we have 1 primary person and then, an alternate, which could be the guest, right? But I guess if we do an alternate, it would have to be a paid membership. So, but I think Councilmember Schaefer would represent as well. I just think it'd be really good to hear what is being discussed during these meetings, and get hear from the communities for the businesses.
I think just being there. Well, that sounds good. It sounds like everyone's on board. We'll get one membership, Jody, then. And that is assigned to Rick Schaefer. We can put that on our I don't think it's an ad hoc committee. Maybe we need a new category to show who will be a part of that. And then we can make it formal with our businesses.
Like I said, on my little cheat sheet that I'm going to send out to you guys, I do have a whole section for local liaisons. So I'll just add Mr. Schaefer's name.
Great. Well, Rick, thank you for doing that. I love having you here. We're going to use you like crazy. Anything else, Council? Jody, am I missing anything?
Oh, I think we're all probably missing something, but right now I'm missing some food in my belly.
All righty. Well, thank you, Council, for being patient with me and helping walk through this process. I'm looking forward to this year and a lot of work on our plate, but we'll continue to work hand in hand. Mayor, thank you for being here. Director Thomas and Jody for taking a big part of your day out for us. Everybody take care. We'll see you a little later next
See you
week.
Tuesday.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.